12th session of the Senate and the second regular session of the 19th Congress is hereby called to order. Our distinguished colleague from the great province of Cavite, Senator Ramon Bong Revilla, will lead the chamber in prayer.
Panginoon, pinupuri po namin sa patuloy mong pagpapala sa amin. Ikaw po ang puno at dulo. Sa iyo nagmumula ang lahat ng biyayang aming tinatamasa at sa iyo rin muling magbabalik sa takdang panahon. Kung kaya't lahat po ng aming galaw, salita at adhika ay laging para sa iyo, tulad ng iyo at para sa ikalulugod mo. Gaya nga na sinabi mo sa Jeremiah 29:11, sapagkat patid kong lubos ang mga plano ko para sa inyo, mga planong hindi nyo ikasasama, kundi para sa inyong ikabubuti. Ito'y mga planong magdudulot sa inyo ng kinabukasang punong-puno ng pag-asa. Nagpapasalamat po kami, Panginoon. Panginoon, naninikluhod po kaming humihingi sa inyo ng gabay at agapay, lalo sa mga panahong ito na damang-dama ang lupit at hagupit ng balik ng naaabusong kalikasan. Tulungan niyo po kaming maging tulay upang bigyan ng lunas ang mga sugat na ito. Use us, O Lord, to be vessels of change so that we can nurture Mother Nature as it has repeatedly done so for mankind. Bayaan niyo po kami naman ang bumawi sa kalingang inihandog nito sa amin sa loob ng mahabang panahon. Ito ay aming samut-hiling nang sa gayon ay maiadya mula sa lupit ng kalamidad at banta ng nagpupuyos na kalikasan. Hindi lang ang ating bansa, kundi ang buong mundo. We dedicate ourselves and our work to you for the good of our nation and our people. We know prayer turns the tides of history. Give us double portion of your spirit. Enable us to carry out the calling you have called us to do. Allow us to burn brighter for your glory. Tanglawan niyo po kaming mga mambabatas at gawing instrumento upang sa pamamagitan ng mga makabuluhang panukala ay makamit ang aming nagkakaisang adhikain. Ang lahat pong ito ay dinudulog namin sa inyo sa ngalan ng inyong kabanal-banalang pangalan. Amen.
Amen. Before I call the roll of members, Majority Leader, would you want to greet the guests that are with us today?
Yes,
That we can at least adjourn the
Mr. President.
very important hearing that they're having in the budget.
I was about to mention that, Mr. President. Please allow me to move to recognize our distinguished guests from the Komeito Party of Japan, the Honorable Yamaguchi Natsuo, the Honorable Okushima Tomoko, and the Honorable Tanei Masaaki. Accompanying them are Ambassador Koshikawa Kazuhiko of the Embassy of Japan and our Philippine Ambassador to Japan, the Honorable Mylene Garcia Albano, who are present here this afternoon at the Executive Gallery.
We are honored to have with us today the Honorable Yamaguchi Natsuo, Party of Japan, partners and I believe allies of the LDP party of our Prime Minister, and members of the House of Councilors, and his fellow party mates, namely Honorable Ukishima Tomoko, and member of the House of Representatives, and Honorable Taniai Masaki, member of the House of Councilors. We also have with us our dear friend, Ambassador Koshikawa, and of course, Ambassador Mylene Garcia. Welcome, my dear friends from Japan. I understand that the Komeito Party is an important coalition partner of the ruling Liberal Democratic Party of Prime Minister Kishida Fumio. Following our productive parliamentary visit to Japan last April, and the reciprocal visit of the Japan-Philippine Parliamentarian Friendship League last July, the visit of Honorable Yamaguchi delegation today is again evidence of our very strong, very robust interparliamentary partnership and relationship with the Philippine Senate and the Diet of Japan. Yokoso, Yokoso, to our friends from Japan, meaning welcome. We warmly welcome you to the Senate of the Philippines.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, may I ask that the session be suspended?
Session be suspended for 1 minute, and we'll ask our delegates from Japan to join us in the podium for a photo opportunity with all the senators.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Session suspended. Dear Secretary, please continue the roll call of members.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senator Angara, Senator Binay, Senator Cayetano Alan, Senator Cayetano Pia, Senator De La Rosa, Senator Ejercito, Senator Escudero, Senator Estrada, Senator Gatchalian, Senator Go, Senator Ontiveros, Senator Lapid, Senator Legarda, Senator Marcos, Senator Padilla, Senator Pimentel, Senator Poe, Senator Revilla, Senator Tolentino, Senator Tulfo, Senator Villanueva, Senator Villar Cynthia, Senator Villar Mark, the Senate President.
We have a perfect attendance, gentlemen, with 24 senators present. The Chair declares the presence of a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, at this juncture, I just be allowed to acknowledge some guests from the gallery. Guest of Senator Go, our SEC chairperson is with us, Chairperson Emilio Aquino and other commissioners and officials of the SEC, with Mr. Paul Gumagay and Mr. Thomas Swires of the United States SEC. We also have with us guests of our Senate President Zubiri, Bago City softball team accompanied by the city councilors of Bago City. Our guests also, Mr. President, the 2023 World Cup of Pool 9-ball champions, James Aranas and Johan Divina Gracia. And guest of Senator J.B. Ejercito, Miss Jet Lee, the Philippine Motorcycle Tourism Ambassadress.
Thank you very much. Welcome to your Senate, ladies and gentlemen.
Mr. President, at this juncture, I move that we defer the approval of the Journal of the 11th Session, Tuesday, August 15, 2023, at a later hour. So move, Mr. President.
There be no objection, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
There be no objection, we ask Secretary to proceed with the reference of business.
Message from the House of Representatives, letter from the House informing the Senate that on 9 August 2023, it passed the following House bills in which it requests the concurrence of the Senate. House number 8286, Crab Hatchery in Mindanao State University, Naawan, Misamis Oriental. House number 8287, Freshwater Fish Hatchery, San Nicolas, Pangasinan. 8288, Pangasinan. 8291, Fish Hatchery, Santa Maria, Pangasinan. 8292, Marine Hatchery, Tabina, Zamboanga del Sur. And 8293, Marine Hatchery, Libagon, Southern Leyte.
To the Committees on Agriculture, Food and Agrarian Reform, and Finance.
8457, Fish Port with Ice Plant and Cold Storage, Nueva Valencia, Guimaras. 8458, Fish Port, Barangay Malintuban, Labason, Zamboanga del Norte. 8459, Fish Port, Barangay Macuyon, Siraway, Zamboanga del Norte. And House 8460, Fish Port, Tanggalan, Aklan.
To the Committee on Agriculture, Food and Agrarian Reform, Public Works, and Finance.
House number 8426, upgrading the Bataan General Hospital and Medical Center in Balanga, Bataan. 8483, establishing in Rodriguez, Province of Rizal, a level 2 hospital. 8484, upgrading the Bangi District Hospital, Bangi Province of Ilocos Norte. 8491, converting the Dr. Catalino Gallego Nava Provincial Hospital. 8492, establishing in Victorias, Negros Occidental, a general hospital. 8494, increasing the bed capacity of Teodoro G. Galagar District Hospital in Yagna, Bohol.
To the Committee on Health, Demography, and Finance.
Bills on first reading, Senate number 2405, upgrading and creating additional positions in the OGCC, amending EO 878 dated 4 March 1983 as amended by EO 299 by Senators Angara and Villanueva.
Committees on Justice, Human Rights, Civil Service, and Finance.
2406, declaring the first day of March of every year as the National Day for Awareness of Religious and Traditional Garments and Attire, Senator Padilla.
The Committee on Culture, Communities, and Muslim Affairs.
Resolutions. Proposed Resolution 736 directing the appropriate Senate committee to conduct an inquiry on the killing of Jerody Gemboy Baltasar by 6 police officers in Navotas City, Senator Pimentel III.
To the Committee on Public Order, Dangerous Drugs, and Justice and Human Rights.
737, urging the appropriate Senate committee to conduct an inquiry on the commission and audit findings on the failure of certain healthcare institutions to provide senior citizen discounts with the end in view of determining possible interventions to ensure proper implementation of full benefits and to curb overpayment of benefits claims by PhilHealth. Senator Angara.
Committee on Health and Demography, Social Justice, and Rural Development.
738, expressing the sense of the Senate in recognizing the strong friendship and cooperation between the Republic of the Philippines and the Republic of Singapore and commemorating the 54th anniversary of our diplomatic relations. Senator Padilla.
To the Committee on Rules, Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, at this juncture, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 2233 under Committee Report number 71. This is the Bill on Public-Private Partnership Act. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, motion is approved.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of the measures that we are in the period of interpellation. With that, I move to resume the period of interpellation and recognize the sponsor, Senator J.V. Ejercito, our Deputy Majority Leader, and to interpellate our Deputy Minority Leader, Senator Risa Ontiveros.
Our distinguished colleague, Senator J.V. Ejercito, is recognized to sponsor and to interpellate our Deputy Minority Floor Leader, Senator Risa Ontiveros.
Salamat kaayo, Mr. President. Good sponsor, pwede po bang magtanong ng mga dagdag na tanong sa admittedly good bill na ito?
Basta po galing sa inyo, alam naman natin na ang intention ay mas lalo pang ayusin at pagandahin ang good bill na ating po tinatawag.
Okay, salamat po, good sponsor. Sige po, baka po yung sa ibang mga tanong ko, follow up sa ilang mga tanong na ni-raise na sa good sponsor ng Minority Leader. Una po, paano mai-improve ang Swiss Challenge? Ngayon tinatawag sa bill na comparative challenge. Paano ma-improve liban sa mas mahabang panahon para sa challenge, Mr. President?
Kahapon po, nabanggit na ang bid bonus system na inilalagyan natin sa batas na ito is another way to improve the Swiss challenge period. Swiss challenge or competitive challenge can be further improved by making sure that the terms for the challenge has been properly vetted and negotiated prior to the actual challenge. This can be achieved by providing proper technical support to the implementing agencies or LGUs when negotiating with the private sector in an unsolicited proposal. So madalas pag walang capacity yung implementing agency or LGU to carefully study the unsolicited proposal presented before them, the proposed legislation seeks to institutionalize the technical support that can be provided to implementing agencies and LGUs through the PPP Center and the PDMF. These provisions are in Section 24 of the PPP Center and 26 of the PDMF.
Alright. Salamat po, good sponsor. I understand po na based sa provision ng bill on comparative challenge, the original proponent will no longer have a chance to match the comparative challenge. Pero yung challenger, kailangan siya mag-offer ng bid na 5 to 10% better. At na-appreciate ko rin po na itong prolonged declaration ng comparative challenge bids ay maiiwasan by requiring the challengers to comply with the service levels and key performance indicators na yung original proponent being challenged ay ninegotiate niya sa gobyerno. Siguro a couple of follow-up questions lamang. So, mabuti po that there will be those clear service levels at saka key performance indicators na kakailanganing i-comply with nung challenger. Pero, yung comparative challenge ba, dun lamang sa price dimension? At tinatanong ko po ito, good sponsor, kasi halimbawa, yung safety, kaligtasan sa highways, which the good sponsor also appreciates bilang isang serious na motorcycle rider. Baka kasing importante yan sa presyo ng ng original proponent o kaya yung resiliency at saka reliability ng mga bagong sources para sa drinking water ay posibleng kasing halaga din sa presyo.
Your Honor, Mr. President, the bid parameter is flexible and hindi lang po ang financial aspect ang tinitignan. Of course, safety, key performance indicators, also the service levels are also factors, no, that can be considered in evaluating an unsolicited proposal, Your Honor, in case they do not come up with it. So hindi lang po it's not only the financial aspect, Your Honor.
Salamat, good sponsor. At salamat din sa paalala nga na, oo nga, pati yung service levels at yung key performance indicators na pwede rin namang idetalye sa bill mismo at pati sa IRRs ay basehan ng pag-evaluate ng comparative challenge at oo nga, hindi lamang yung presyo. So, ang understanding ko po, good sponsor, sa ilalim ng bill na to, pwede po ba? Pwede nga ba na yung PPP governing body ay magre-require na kahit sa case-to-case basis lang na yung Swiss challenge o comparative challenge ay yun na nga should do better also in other important dimensions kumpara dun sa original proponent. So tama po ba yung understanding ko, good sponsor?
Actually, it's the implementing the proper body or authority that would determine is the NEDA and ICC, Your Honor.
Okay.
They're the ones who they can determine the parameters
Alright.
in the terms and conditions, Your Honor.
Salamat, good sponsor. So itong bill na ito ay magiging dagdag na gabay pa pati sa NEDA ICC mismo. Alright.
Yes,
Salamat.
that's correct, Your Honor.
Salamat, good sponsor. Ngayon naman po, isa pang concern, paano gagawing based sa transparent rules at based sa market challenge ang concession extensions? Halimbawa sa kaso ng Malampaya, Maynilad. Alam ko po na meron ng mga provision sa kasalukuyang bill na binabanggit kung papaano gagabayan itong mga contract extensions. At nakikita ko rin po na may mga circumstansya kung kailan yung implementing agency na siya po yung counterpart sa kontrata ay pwede ring payagan ito, no, yung mga extension. So pwede po ba tayo makarinig ng elaboration sa mga probisyong iyon na pro-transparency, pro-market challenge sa sitwasyon ng mga contract or concession extensions. And kung maaari, good sponsor, using layperson's language at kung meron din pong ibang halimbawa na gustong ibigay, good sponsor.
Yes, Your Honor, Mr. President, according to Section 19 of the proposed PPP Act, the contract variation or extension or expansion ng isang existing PPP project shall have a clear set of rules and procedures for approval. Tulad ng binanggit kahapon, hindi unilateral ang pag-aproba ng mga extension na ito ay dadaan sa approving body. Contract variations not covered by the above shall undergo approval by the approving body in terms of the impact of government undertakings, performance standards, and service charges. Sa pagre-review ng approving body, maaring tratuhin ang contract variation bilang isang allowable variation or isang bagong proyekto. Kung ang pasya ay isa itong bagong proyekto, isa sa ilalim ito sa approval process under Section C7 ng PPP Act. So it has to undergo another approval process under the Section 7 of the PPP Act. But there are circumstances when contract extensions may be warranted. It would be good to have interagency review, Your Honor, Mr. President. The policy is to have a set scope, Your Honor.
Salamat, good sponsor. Malinaw na, syempre, kumbaga, iba na yung nature ng concession na pinag-uusapan, hindi mere extension, so mabuti dadaan siya ulit mula sa simula sa prosesong provided for nitong panukala. But it's also good to hear na sa bill, kapag mere extension, with all the privileges attaching to that, ay merong pa ring clear set of rules. And kanina ko po, good sponsor, nabanggit ko nga na merong ng mga naunang halimbawa from which we can learn lessons. We could glean best practices. We could also come up with recommendations on how to do it better and better, lalo na sa pamamagitan nitong PPP bill or law. Halimbawa, sa kaso ng Maynilad at saka Manila Water Contract Extensions noong 2009 pa. Yung sitwasyon nun ay mayroong pending major rate increase right before the elections. So ang alaala ng mga nagdokumento nito, yung contract extension at amendment, well, nag-serve siya ng purpose na nakaiwas sa isang major pre-election rate increase. Pinayagan din ang deferment of investments na due dun sa concession agreement at additional engagements din over a longer term. So, a good sponsor for the record, I think ang mga contract extensions should not result in the deferment of service level commitments. Kahit conceivable na baka i-defer at i-spread at least yung rate increases over a longer time. So kung merong mang pagbabago sa rates dahil sa extension, pero maintain pa rin yung service level commitments. And lastly, on this line of questioning, good sponsor, alam ko mahirap tumingin sa nakaraan, di ba? May kasabihan tayo na ang vision natin 2020 in retrospect. Pero ano lang, kung pagbigyan ako ng good sponsor, for our education at para i-anticipate yung value added ng bill na to, paano kaya yung mga contract extensions na ganyan, no, sa water, sa Malampaya, paano kaya nag-govern kung itong proposed law already in place noong mga panahong iyon? Good sponsor.
Tsaka merong interagency review pa rin. Yung dati wala. Your Honor, Mr. President, no, just looking back, sabi nyo nga, ayaw na natin tignan, but we have to learn from the mistakes of the past. Ang problema dun sa MWSS extension, the contract was not given an economic and financial review. Yung pong pagkakaiba. But, well, under this bill, we will make sure that every contract or anything that any amendment, extension, whatever, has to have an interagency review, Your Honor. So yun ang pagkakaiba. Dati po, wala talagang economic and financial review, that we will make sure that, again, lessons learned, that we will have to put the safety mechanisms and safeguards that needed so that we will get the best, hindi na po tayo malulutong bakaw ika nga, no? Just like in the past, Your Honor.
Salamat, good sponsor. I also failed to mention earlier, salamat din sa pagbanggit ng interagency review, no, in the case of ganitong mga paano gagawing transparent, based sa transparent rules at market challenge ang ganitong mga extensions. And amazing, no, to think na yung mga naunang mga extension na iyon ay hindi dumaan sa economic and financial review. Eh yun pa naman yung isa sa three-way test na pinag-usapan ninyo, three-way din ninyo ng good sponsor, minority leader at si Sen. Sherwin kagabi, no? Financial, legal at saka technical. So it's good to know na dito sa panukalang batas na ito, sisiguruhin na yung isang essential test or review ay idadaan doon ang anumang concession.
That is correct, Your Honor.
extensions.
Likewise, had if there was an interagency review, we might have gotten better terms, Your Honor. So yun ang problema talaga. That time there was none.
And syempre sa anumang batas na tulad nitong sa PPP bill na may parte ang gobyerno, we're always looking for the best outcomes for the government on behalf of the people. Good sponsor, yung pong service levels dito sa mga concession extensions, papayagan po ba yung postponement nung pag-meet nung service levels na iyon?
Your Honor, no, it will not be allowed if ever they do not deliver as agreed upon. Then there will be corresponding penalties, and if penalties or even to the point of cancellation if really they do not come up, no, as expected and as um, as uh, as agreed upon, Your Honor.
Yes. Salamat, good sponsor. I think that's only fair kasi kahit sino namang party sa isang kontrata or sa isang concession for that matter, kahit pa nga yung gobyerno yon, no? If it's the public side of a PPP, napipinalize kapag hindi tumutupad sa service level commitments. And the same should apply to other stakeholders, including private sector. At hindi naman napopostpone yung pakinabang sa isang concession o concession extension. So, hindi naman dapat din mapostpone ang commitment. So, ang pagtupad sa mga commitments. Salamat, good sponsor. Moving to another topic, kapag naman may lugi ang isang PPP project dahil di umano sa force majeure, kuno, o unanticipated circumstances. Tapos, dahil doon babaguhin ang PPP contract, price escalation man yan o postponement ng investment, commitments, may provision po ba yung panukala para sa patas at transparent na proseso at na hindi ito dinadaan sa palakasan?
Yes, Your Honor, Mr. President, Section 21 of the PPP Act requires all PPP contracts to define all events that may lead to its termination, including but not limited to either party event of default, force majeure, and other no-fault termination events and other termination events as may be agreed upon by the parties to the PPP contract. The PPP Act also requires that the contract should provide a process for remedies, curing periods, lender step-in rights, and written requirements agreed by both parties, the details of which will be threshed out in the contract. Ang proseso na nabanggit ay determined bago pa sa contract signing at na-review ng appropriate statutory council at ng DOF. So, kaya makakatiyak ang proseso ay patas, transparent, at hindi po dinadaan sa palakasan gaya po ng inyong nabanggit. The increase in price or change in obligations might trigger a contract variation that will bring the contract back to the review of NEDA ICC, in which case there will be an interagency review, again, to ensure that any resulting remedy is fair and transparent. So again, the PPP Act would guarantee that there will always be interagency review, Your Honor.
Good sponsor, ito na po ba yung existing... yes, Mr. President, the good gentleman from Sorsogon would
With the
like to
permission of the
interject.
lady, may I ask the
Senator
provision
Escuderos recognized.
in the bill where that is stated? Because Section 21 speaks of termination of the contract. I think what the Honorable Antiveros was making mention of was if the PPP private proponent fails to comply with the terms of the agreement, and if it will be changed, extended, or in any way modified, who gets to decide that? And can it be decided upon? Section 21 is termination, Mr. President, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor, give us just a few seconds, Your Honor.
Yes, Mr. President.
Session suspended. Resume.
Mr. President, regarding the point of Senator Scudero, yes, it's not yet on the bill, but there's a proposal already, no, for amendment, and it should read as follows: the approving body shall evaluate and render its decision on the project and set forth the required parameters, terms, and conditions which shall be the basis for the drafting and approval of tender documents and contract. So in the most expeditious manner, considering the nature and complexity of the PPP project, provided that such decision shall be rendered within 120 calendar days from the date of receipt of the complete submission.
Thank you, good sponsor. And to the gentleman from Sorsogon, na-anticipate na tuloy ng good sponsor yung follow-up question na ito na po ba yung pinag-uusapan natin ay nasa existing rules na or improvement po ba ito? And in fact, it is yet to be included as a maybe committee amendment in the bill itself.
Yes, that is correct, Your Honor.
Okay, salamat po, good sponsor. And it's good to know dito sa this part of our interpellation, it's good to know na kailangan beforehand pa lang sa pagsimula pa lang ng concession agreement or relationship, defined na kung ano yung force majeure. Hindi pwedeng i-cite later in the game at maghabol na lang ng kung ano yung definition niyan. Then sa simula pa lang, may mga remedies available to both parties. At yun na nga, may mga ending outcomes, including termination, but also others na if further provide for ng good sponsor sa bill. So salamat po para doon. And just for the record, good sponsor, I ask this because we know for a fact na dun sa kaso ng mga water concessions, may mga contract renegotiations nung unang 5 taon pa lang ng mga concessions na iyan. At lahat sila na-extend yung kontrata, na itaas yung presyo, o kaya na ipagpaliban yung mga promised investments. And I look forward to na itong PPP bill will provide more effectively para sa stricter compliance ng both parties sa PPP projects at to the advantage or equal benefit of government. And further for the record, good sponsor, kasi kung discretionary nga itong mga usaping ito, kaysa sa based on rules at kung untransparent, di itong post-bid contract renegotiations, ma-undermine yung mismong integridad ng competitive PPP procurement process. After all, kung may isang party na hindi makakomply, siguro naman hindi lamang siya sa buong bansa ay pwedeng pumalit, no? Kung competition din talaga ang pag-uusapan natin. Kasi pwede naman palang mag-renegotiate pagkatapos ma-eliminate na yung mga competitor. So, I'm glad that the bill seeks to preempt these kinds of situations. Sunod na topic, good sponsor.
Your Honor, if I may
Yes,
just
good sponsor.
respond. We have learned from past lessons, among them the MWSS experience. And siguro isama mo na ipira with the promise of privatization so that there will be competition and lowering rates. But ang natuloy lang, privatization, yung lowering of rates never materialized. And probably what will be the big difference, Your Honor, Mr. President, with the passage of this measure, that in the past, it was only the implementing agency usually. And ang nangyayari po, nabubuli sila no? ng mga gusto pumasok, no? Bigger entities, no? So that's why we always encourage and make sure that it's not only the implementing agency that should review, analyze, and make the decision. It will always be an interagency review so that we will get the best possible deal, no, for the government, Your Honor.
Indeed, good sponsor, yung interagency character nitong mga review, talagang hopefully, no, over the next years na ma-implement itong PPP law, talagang pipigilan or iiwasan o babasagin yung anumang regulatory capture na maaring nangyari sa panig ng sino mang ahensya at para to truly get the best deal for government and the citizenry and maglikha ng conducive environment para sa totoong rules-based na competition.
That is correct, Your Honor. That's why we will always make sure that iba yung interagency.
Nga po.
As I mentioned, big companies with their lawyers, expensive lawyers, advisor, they can bully everybody kung isa lang po magdidesisyon. So, that's why at least if it's an interagency, it is medyo, I think we will have a better chance to have the best deal for government.
At salamat din, good sponsor, sa pagbanggit sa EPIRA bilang isang halimbawa that we could learn from and do better on moving forward. At for one, Mr. President, naglulook forward ako sa pagpapatuloy ng pagbalik-aral natin tungkol sa EPIRA na nagsimula ng tahakin yung ganyang direksyon under the previous chair of the Senate Committee on Energy, ang ating presiding officer, at naglulook forward to ako sa pagpapatuloy niyan sa pamumuno naman ng kasalukuyang chair,
I think
Sen. Rafi.
we have so much experience, good and bad, but more bad, I think.
Unfortunately, good sponsor.
That make us stronger, hopefully, and again, lessons learned that we just don't make the same mistake again, Your Honor.
Yes, kaisa po nyo ako dyan, good sponsor. Ngayon po, paksa na very close to my heart din. Pumapasok din sa joint ventures ang DSUD sa private developers at saka LGUs. Pwede po bang PPP at JV rules ng LGU ang gamitin? Follow-up din po ito sa isang point na ni-raise ni Minority Leader sa kanyang interpellation. Kung pwede, meron bang kailangan baguhin sa mga proseso nila? Sponsor.
Your Honor, Mr. President, yes, with regards to housing, which I know is very close also to your heart, no, and you supported the creation of Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development. Unfortunately, the budget that is allotted every year for housing is really very a measly amount. That's why with the very ambitious housing program of the administration, to address the housing backlog. Nung binubuo pa natin yung DSUD, Your Honor, if I remember it right, it was almost 2 million, the backlog. But now it's almost 6 million. So yung sandaling panahon, halos nag-triple na. So, but given the limited fiscal space and the beastly budget that is allotted to housing, it will be impossible to reach the 1 million per year housing. That's why hopefully through the PPP Act, we will encourage the private sector. I think that the new Secretary Acusar, who is one of the more successful developers rising from rags to riches story, and I think he's unconventional. Hopefully, he might just be what we need. No, he's thinking out of the box, medyo innovative. But what we want to make sure that in the PPP Act, that there will be a legal framework. O kaya may batas na lalaman ang gagamitin sa pag-implement ng PPP ng mga LGUs. For example, LGUs will enter into housing through PPP. Ito man ay sa pamamagitan ng concession agreement, or joint venture agreement. At least there will be a legal framework this time that would serve as a guide and make sure that hindi po tayo that the LGU or any other, or the province or the city or will not be at a disadvantage. So we will encourage also social PPPs like housing, healthcare, education, but at least there will be a framework already that would be serve as a guide.
Thank you, good sponsor. Dahil ang good sponsor ay chair din po ng Senate Committee on Housing, maganda rin po kung pwede nilang ilarawan yung partnerships with developers at kung anong current rules na go-govern sa mga partnerships nito to help us all continue to think out of the box along PPP lines.
Yes, Your Honor, Mr. President, as I mentioned earlier, Secretary Acusar is unconventional, kakaiba. But we just have to make sure that there will be, the PPP framework is there. Sa para po We know he wants to be innovative. Probably might be too aggressive na meron tayong we might be able to, they might bend rules or something. So at least the PPP framework will always be there to serve as the guide, and at least ito yung magiging blueprint ng ating mga PPP contracts, Your Honor.
Alam niyo po, good sponsor, nung nasa teatro ako nung teenage years, may kasabihan doon na mabuti na yung sobra kaysa kulang. So I share the reasoned judgment of the good sponsor na mabuti na rin siguro kung napaka-bold ng DSUD Secretary, at the same time, maigi din na timing-wise, sasabay itong PPP law para gabayan. No? Either i-temper or balansehin. To create a conducive environment na yung thinking out of the box ay maka-produce ng resulta para sa atin on the housing front, within a legal framework na ma-institutionalize po ito.
Yes, I'm hoping that Secretary Acosar, sabi ko nga, ano siya rags to riches, saka kakaiba yung success story niya, might just be someone that we need, no, to head the issue. I'm hoping that he is the answer. Kasi nga po, kung yung mga past experiences, well, under the old arrangement, under HUD-C, because implementing, the housing agencies were still doing their own thing. At least hopefully under our issue that we passed here in the Senate, hopefully with the key shelter agencies under one roof, they will now move into one direction and more coordinated this time. Unlike before that, they had their own mandates and had their own programs. So I'm hopeful that Sec Jerry, again, coming from the private sector and using his experience and his success story behind him, will be the one really to be able to deliver the ambitious 1 million homes needed every year, Your Honor.
Or at least 6 million homes by the end of the administration. Hindi po ako gambling woman, good sponsor, pero I have my money on that hope also na sinabi ng good sponsor. Ngayon, meron akong particular na scenario sa tanong na to, good sponsor. Na may existing PPP. Ang halimbawa ko dito yung NLEX Segment 8.2 doon sa Quezon City. Pwede kayang baguhin yon para yung proponent at yung LGU na ang bahala sa resettlement at hindi na yung NHA. At kung pwede man yun, ano yung magiging proseso doon sa ilalim ng batas na ito, good sponsor?
Your Honor, Mr. President, from what I know, for example, in the North-South commuter line, like in this phase, the index, it's usually the stakeholders or the proponents together with NHA that provides the relocation or the housing. But if the LGU is willing to provide housing, then that will be acceptable, Your Honor, Mr. President, if kung ano pong makakapabilis, no? Because NHA sometimes they're not really the projects, no? Sometimes it's less desirable. So any agency that is willing to undertake the resettlement will be most welcome. But it's usually NHA that undertakes a resettlement with big projects, Your Honor. Like in the case of the railway projects, it's the NHA which undertakes the resettlement.
Actually nga, good sponsor, isang dekada nang delayed yung simula ng resettlement. So talagang this is a good or a bad example nung performance ng isang key shelter agency sa usapin ng resettlement. And but I'm encouraged by the openness of the good sponsor at syempre, following the line of response of the good sponsor kanina, siguro kung pwede itong gawin, there will be certain conditions set. And I suppose mag-a-apply din yung sinasabi ng good sponsor kanina pa na interagency ang magiging approach dito. Hindi unilateral lang on the part of, say, the proponent itself.
Like for example, Your Honor, Mr. President, because NLEX is a private entity, so probably kung may tatabaan man, no, that if there are informal settlers that need to be resettled, it can be subject to the agreement of the parties, and more often than not, the proponent who is will be willing to provide resettlement so that it doesn't hamper or just schedule or para hindi po magkaroon ng delay yung pong projects, no? So, and the PPPs are contracts at the end of the day, as long as it does not violate existing law, anything can be agreed upon. So if it will be easier if the private entity, like for example NLEX, is willing to undertake the resettlement of the informal settlers, Your Honor.
Salamat, good sponsor. And siguro kahit pagkatapos nitong interpellation, I'm just making of record na hihilingin ko sana sa good sponsor, bilang hindi lang sponsor nitong bill, pero chair nga po ng Senate Committee on Housing, na baka pwedeng maengganyo yung mga stakeholders dito sa long-running saga ng NLEX 8.2 na i-consider ang PPP bill once passed into law bilang isang framework para makahanap finally ng solusyon after a decades long wait. For the record,
Yes, Your Honor,
sponsor.
Mr. President, we'll look into it, no? Of course, we want to also alleviate the sufferings of those affected. If it's indeed been a decade,
Yes.
they really have to be given relief already, no, from their anguish, Your Honor.
Salamat. Maraming salamat para doon, good sponsor. Isang follow-up ko rin sa isang issue na in-interpellate ni Minority Leader. Ano ang kailangang baguhin sa proposed bill dahil sa Maharlika? May sulat po na pinadala si Sec. R.C. Balisacan tugon sa mga tanong na pinost ko noong hearings pa dun sa Maharlika Investment Fund. And I quote, good sponsor, sabi po ni Sec. R.C., if the MIF has to be set up for such purpose, the current PPP frameworks in the Philippines also need to be modified to explicitly authorize funding of subsidies, guarantees, or equity participation in PPP projects through that fund.
Well, Your Honor, Mr. President, while that could be a scenario, although unlike the one given that many safeguards in the we note, however, that this may be beyond the purview of the PPP law, and such safeguards, maybe prohibitions, should be developed in the IRR or the investment policy of the Maharlika law.
Kaya ako po tinanong ito, a good sponsor, kasi may mga nag-aalala, limbawa na yung PPP project proponents, baka magpasok sila ng aggressive bids or dive bids na hindi kayang i-match ng competitors. Pero later on, dahil nga yung dive bid na yon ay unrealistic in the first place, tapos ang layunin lang nun maipanalo yung kontrata, baka hilingin nila na yung Maharlika Corporation ay pumasok, dala yung kapital ng Maharlika para tulungan yung PPP proponent to achieve viability and creditworthiness. But, I understand the good sponsor said baka beyond the purview of the PPP law, but baka meron silang gustong i-reflect on sa tanong.
Well, again, Maharlika can come in, for example, in any consortium as an investor. Unlike the PPP, wherein the proponent or example, if I may just read, no? The PPP Act is promoting proper project structuring. Part of this practice is having shadow bids. Government is supposed to know what is a resale bid, and this practice will prevent dive bids, Your Honor, Mr. President.
Well, sabi niyo nga, good sponsor, government is supposed to know what are shadow bids. So, siguro follow-up question na lang dito before I move to my last topic. Alam po ba natin, Mr. President, good sponsor, paano i-detect yung mga dive bids na iyon? Limbawa, ito bang bill natin, nire-require ang gobyerno na gumawa ng cost estimates, lalo na para sa mga unsolicited projects?
The short answer is yes, Your Honor, Mr. President. The GOR does a shadow bid to assess what bids could be expected from the private partners. In the proposed PPP Act, we want to strengthen this by institutionalizing the PDMF and the PPP Center to ensure that the government has the capacity to do this, Your Honor.
All right.
So,
Good sponsor.
a shadow bid is like it's a cost estimate, Your Honor.
Okay po. So, mabuti po, good sponsor, kasi kung yung PPP governing body at yung implementing agency, nakapartner niya sa proponents, ay alam kung paano gawin ito, i-detect yung mga ganong klaseng bids, then definitely isang paraan yon para pigilin, iwasan ang mga dive bids na baka gamitin lang ng mga influential private proponents, hingin niya, i-rescue sila somewhere down the road ng Maharlika. So, huling tanong na lamang po, good sponsor. Tama po, di ba, that we intend this bill to be comprehensive in its coverage? Good sponsor.
Yes, Your Honor, Mr. President. We just want to make sure that there'll be no exceptions. As I mentioned earlier, as an example, BCDA wanted
Yes.
to be exempted from the PPP Act, but it would be a bad precedent, Your Honor, because other agencies would also seek that exemption. We just want to make sure, again, that the advantage of having a PPP Act, that all of these projects, so both solicited, especially and unsolicited, will go through the rigorous analysis and rigorous vetting also of the players, and will go through the interagency review. So that will be the difference, Your Honor, Mr. President. And the PPP Center and the interagency review can guide also, will serve as a guide, Your Honor.
At tama kayo, good sponsor. Kayo nga yung nagtawag ng pansin ko sa paksang ito kasi as you reiterated now, binanggit nyo kahapon dun sa interpellation ni Minority Leader na gusto nga ng BCDA ma-exempt sa rules na to. Minanifest po ba nila nung committee hearing? Bakit nila gustong ma-exempt? I mean, may special reason ba? Good sponsor.
Yes, Your Honor, Mr. President, they manifested. Hindi po ako nag-hear nun eh. It was sa Senator Bong Revilla and they just took over now in the sponsorship. But according to the Department of Finance, yes, they did manifest that they want to be exempted from the PPP Act because they, according to them, they have been entering into contracts, entering into projects or programs already, and it has worked for them. But we still maintain that it has to be comprehensive, no exemption. Everybody has, all PPPs have to go through the, should be covered by this Act, Your Honor, Mr. President. Again, to make sure that the interagency review would always be there to guide, and the PPP Center would serve as a guide to all of these projects, Your Honor.
And I agree, good sponsor, dapat comprehensive yung coverage ng batas dahil pwede namang sabihin ng kahit sinong proponent, it worked for us or it worked for us, but did it work for government as a whole? Did it work for the public? So, yun naman yung at least gustong i-provide for ng PPP bill, as I understand it. And I think we needed to discuss this matter during interpellation, kaya salamat sa pagpapaunlak ng good sponsor. Kasi, baka naman biglang sa period of amendments na lang mabigla na kasama pala sa amendments ng committee at committee members ang BCDA exemption without the benefit of the discussion. But with the leadership of the good sponsor, I am assured na ang intention talaga and ang magiging outcome is comprehensive yung coverage
Yes,
ng
Your Honor, we
bill.
will make sure that there will be no exemptions.
Opo.
It will be really comprehensive.
Opo. And I'm still wondering, good sponsor, I would suppose kasi na may ibang mga ahensya o GOCCs na paniniwala nila somehow special sila at gusto nilang patuloy na i-engage yung private sector in the old way and following their own rules. Kung tama po yung hinala ko, ano po ba itong mga line agencies? DA ba? Kahit DSUD ba na pinag-usapan natin ngayon lang? NHA, halimbawa? LUWA? Yung water districts? LLDA ba? O NIA? O kahit AFP ba for security considerations? Good sponsor?
Officially BCDA lang. Your Honor, Mr. President, it's only BCDA that officially had the position, no, that they wanted to be exempted, and also the LGUs at the start. But upon understanding that we will not meddle in their PPPs as long as it does not run in conflict with the master plan, with the national government, with the main infrastructure projects of government and programs of government, then they are free to go into PPP contracts so yun po, kaya they nag-step back na po sila. They understood that we will not meddle as long as it does not run in conflict with the master plan.
Salamat, good sponsor, and I'm glad na nasimulan o na ipagpatuloy pala na rin sa interpellation yung concern na yon about harmonizing and not being in conflict nung PPP rules na gusto nating institutionalize sa batas na ito at yung PPP rules din ng mga LGUs. At least, even if it might, baka may mag-arise na periods of some tension or kailangan may i-reconcile, at least cognizant na itong bill na ito and can provide guidance also given yung naging proceedings sa hearings. And pero tanong, good sponsor, kasi nag-enumerate ako ng ilang mga line agencies, no, na akala ko baka humingi rin ng exemption. Yung water districts po ba, sa ilalim ba sila ng purview ng GCG or ng LGUs din? Speaking of LGUs, good sponsor.
Your Honor, this bill does not seek to reclassify. Water districts are declared as GOCCs by the Supreme Court, Your Honor. So, in addition, since as I mentioned, water districts are considered as quasi-public corporations performing public service and supplying public ones. So, with the foregoing, it makes sense to classify water districts as national implementing agencies, Your Honor.
Alright. Salamat, good sponsor. Kaya ko itinanong ang mga ito about BCDA and other agencies that may have asked for exemption. Halimbawa lang po ng mga special reasons na baka somewhere down the road pwedeng i-cite para humingi ng exemption sa rules na to. Pag may PPP na sa, halimbawa, flood retention infrastructures sa mga pinaka-apektado nating mga lalawigan, yun ba magiging within the purview ng panukalang ito? Baka kasi sabihin na special naman ito. No? Wala bang special reason na pwedeng gamitin na kailangan ng special and emergency procurement? Dahil pwera sa flood control project ito, may konting hydropower din itong ipoproduce at pang-irrigation din siya. And for these reasons, baka hingin ba ng Malacanang na exempted siya from this law sa dahilang interagency siya and bigger than a mere single agency's mandate and therefore OP ang dapat mag-handle ng procurement na ito.
Yes, Your Honor, Mr. President, water and flood retention are cross-jurisdictional.
Yes.
So if it is a PPP project, in case it becomes a PPP project as defined in the proposed bill, the proposed PPP Act will then apply.
Thank you, good sponsor. And actually, napakagandang pangitain yun eh. Kung yung ganyang malalaking at napaka-significant, maybe game-changing projects na hindi lang isang bayan o isang lalawigan, but multiple LGUs would come together, bring their old plans from before. Naalala ko, panahon ni dating President GMA, may ring dike design si Architect Palafox. Ang sarili nating Madjo, meron siyang feasibility study na pinagawa years ago, and I'm sure there are still very valuable findings and recommendations there. Yung mga local government officials hanggang ngayon, bukang bibig yung mga rain catchment facilities. And sabi nila sa atin, they've started talking, kunyari, 3 provincial governors o 2 Pampanga mayors and vice mayors. Exciting po kung pagpasa nitong PPP bill into law, kung magsanib puwersa nga sila, multiple LGUs, siguro naman makaka-attract ng attention at excitement halimbawa ng NEDA, and then ng mga private sector entities sa mga probinsya nila, and even civil societies, mga apektadong sektor sa mga probinsya nila. Ang ganda pong maging isang best practice if within the PPP rin nila i-consider gawin ang mapag-uusapan nilang programa o mga proyekto. At kapag nagtagumpay sila, edi magiging model na pwedeng i-replicate, adapt or replicate sa iba pang flood-prone provinces sa ating bansa. So, napakalaking potential po ng bill na ito, lalo na din dahil comprehensive ang intention niya.
That's correct, Your Honor, Mr. President. Hopefully, likewise, if we can also pass the comprehensive master plan for infrastructure development together with this PPP Act, I think it may just solve all of these problems. No? As we mentioned during the hearing just last week about the flooding, yung problema kasi natin na because of our 3-year and 6-year term, Your Honor, Mr. President, most of the projects and a lot of government officials elected, they only think of the short and medium term. What we really need what we really need is long-term planning, especially for major infrastructure like railways, airports, flood control. Sabi nga nila, nangyayari patsi-patsi, no? Yung flood control, may mga slope protection, may mga ganyan. But what we need are just what the majority leader said in Bulacan, the major floodways, retention dams. These are what we need so that sa problema po natin sa tubig, it's we have a lot of rainfall during rainy season, but every summer we just don't know how to retain it. So probably with the passage of the hopefully if we can pass the comprehensive master plan, we'll have a blueprint, and the PPP will now be the implementer, no? Will be the implementing measure, no, to undertake all of these major infrastructure projects, Your Honor, Mr. President. So hopefully the integrated water resource management, no, the water management really needs long-term planning as well, Your Honor.
Yes, good sponsor. For long-term and sustainable solutions. So, salamat po. Huling tanong na lang sa paksang ito at sa interpellation ko. Yung GCG po ba was able to provide its inputs to this bill? Kasi nga po siya po yung supervisor ng mga GOCCs. At sinabi po ba ng commission na sang-ayon sila sa comprehensive coverage ng bill na ito?
Your Honor, Mr. President, according to the DOF officials here, that yes, indeed, the GCG was consulted during the hearings, Your Honor.
At sang-ayon po sila sa comprehensive coverage?
Since they are not involved in the PPP project, so they have no objection, Your Honor.
Okay. Good to know. Salamat, good sponsor. Maraming salamat po, good sponsor, Mr. President. I feel reassured, good sponsor, na kahit pa yung Office of the President ay hindi ma-exempt sa discipline, sa mga rules dito sa batas na ito, but at least neither BCDA nor any other line agency nor any GOCC ay ma-exempt. So, makamit in large part yung intensyon ng batas na ito na maging comprehensive ang coverage niya. So maraming salamat po, good sponsor.
Thank you also,
Salamat,
Senator De
Mr.
Veras.
President.
Thank you, Mr. President. While waiting, Mr.
For
President, the gentleman from Sorsogon, Senator Chis Escudero, is seeking the floor. I move that he be recognized, Mr. President.
We recognize Senator Escudero.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a few points, if the distinguished sponsor will allow.
Certainly, Mr. President, anything from Senator Escudero, I'm sure that this will help improve and refine this measure, Your Honor.
Mr. President, for the information of the technical staff behind or on the side of Senator JB, we will include it in the proposed amendments would suffice. An answer like that would suffice. But to abbreviate the proceedings. Number one, Mr. President, Your Honor, how will the IA decide if there are two proponents in an unsolicited proposal? The only thing I saw in the bill stated, whatever is more advantageous to the government and the public, but that was not decided upon. That was not clarified nor defined. Mention was made of a bonus point system, but neither is that clear. So what is the definition of advantageous to the government and the public? How will the IA decide who among two proponents in an unsol will be given the unsolicited proponent status?
Your Honor, Mr. President, let me just give an example. For example, a PNOC would want to have an LNG facility. The choices will be land-based or sea-based, but it will be the implementing agency that would know and will have the expertise to assess which will be good, no, for such a venture, Your Honor. So,
Mr. President, what if they're similar? So may I suggest, Mr. President, Your Honor, for the technical committee to kindly consider a definition of what advantageous to the government and the public would mean, on top of and more than the bonus point system made mention of? Number two, the second point, Mr. President, Your Honor, on solicited bids. It said that insofar as solicited bids, it will be through public bidding. And it can make or go through a two-tier bidding process. That's clearly not in the government procurement law. What public bidding is being considered or referred to here? This is with solicited proposals, Mr. President, Your Honor.
Your Honor, Mr. President, this act would provide the bidding framework, no, there would be the practice is that two-stage bidding is a market practice to weed out.
Mr. President, Your Honor, Section 9 does not state that. It says it may have a two-tier bidding. So it's discretionary and it's not mandated, neither is it clear. And number two, Mr. President, Your Honor, while I'm at it, neither does it make mention if you're going to award it to the highest bidder or to the lowest bidder. And what exactly are we bidding? If you remember, Mr. President, Your Honor, during the time of former President Aquino, they bidded out the right to construct a solicited project. Meaning to say, on top of the cost of the project, the proponent would have to bid for the right to construct it, and at that time, highest bidder won. In this case, what is the intention of the bill? Highest bidder, lowest bidder, most advantageous to government, most advantageous to the public. How will that be determined?
it's not usually the highest bidder. So, paano nga ma-determine kung which is the best bid? Your Honor, Mr. President, the part of the bid parameter will be set by the approving body. That's why we are also encouraging that it will always be an interagency
Mr. President,
that
Your Honor.
interagency review, so that we make sure that all bases will be covered, Your Honor, Mr. President.
Mr. President, Your Honor, may I suggest that it be clarified and included in the bill as a policy, simply because, Mr. President, prior to the term of former President Aquino, it was unheard of to bid out the right to construct a public works project via solicited proposal by government. It was only done actually during his time. Now, it's about time we clarified it. Can government do that? Under what circumstances can government do that? And if you say you're going to do a public bidding, what are the parameters of the public bidding? The implementing agency, GOCC or LGU, cannot be left to their own vices with respect to how to go about it. We either allow it, don't allow it under circumstances so that it is clarified, Mr. President, Your Honor, by way of policy on the part of government, bearing in mind that the intention is to encourage the private sector to invest in public infrastructure projects. So we should make it easier for them instead of making it more difficult for them. Last point, second to the last point, Mr. President,
Yes,
Your
I agree, Your
Honor,
Honor, Mr. President.
is on the JVs, because the bill covers basically unsolicited, solicited, and JVs. On JVs, how will an implementing agency, GOCC or LGU, decide how to enter in, which company to enter into a JV with? What would be the parameters? Public bidding was not mentioned. Negotiated arrangements were not mentioned. Neither was competitive selection process mentioned. What's preventing a secretary, the head of an agency, from going into a JV with his friends insofar as government properties owned by the department is concerned? What would be the parameters of this?
Yes, Your Honor, Mr. President, we can clarify, and the joint venture is one of the processes under this modal or one of the modalities, and if it becomes it can be well, it is a modality, it is a type of PPP. So the parameters within of this act will apply, Your Honor.
So the implementing agency will decide if it's advantageous to government or not. What if there are two proponents insofar as a JV is concerned? How will the implementing agency decide the spin between these two proponents for a JV?
Your Honor, Mr. President, again, if it will be a PPP, we will still encourage that the NEDA ICC will be the proper approving body.
That is not the case, Mr. President, in the proposed amendments, if at all, with respect to LGUs and with respect to certain threshold amounts. It will not go through the NEDA board or NEDA ICC anymore. So, may I suggest again, Mr. President, Your Honor, at the proper time, for this to be clarified, because this will arise. A time will come when there will be two companies or proponents vying for a JV with an implementing agency, GOCC or LGU. And guidelines must be set up in this law in order to provide mechanisms by which a decision can be made. Because the last thing we want, Mr. President, Your Honor, is for the rules not to be clear enough and to open the doors for litigation, which will cause further delay instead of actually facilitating PPP projects.
Yes, Honor, I agree with your proposal, Your Honor, that this has to be clarified. So at least, well, the intention is really not to delay anymore, so that we will of course accept anything that you'll propose, any amendments, so that you'll come for you, so that everything, the parameters will be there and be defined, Your Honor.
And as a last point, Mr. President, Your Honor, in the transitory clause, may I suggest and or remind the technical committee to kindly be sensitive not only to vested rights but also to the constitutional provision on the impairment of obligations of contracts because it is stated there that all existing and/or ongoing PPP projects will be subject to Section 7 of the bill, which should not be the case unless the option is being given to the PPP proponent.
Yes, we will make sure, Your Honor, Mr. President, that this will be clarified, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Your Honor. I appreciate your candid answers and for entertaining the questions and suggestions of this representation. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you also, Senator Escudero.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Escudero. Thank you, Senator Ejercito. Mr. President, there being no other member who wishes to interpolate, I move that we close the period of interpellations and debate.
There being no objection to the motion, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2233 under Committee Report number 71. So move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, motion is approved.
President, I move
The
for-
measure is suspended.
Mr. President, I move for a minute suspension.
Session suspended.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, some admin matters. I move that we dispense with the reading of the Journal of the 11th session, Tuesday, August 15, 2023, and consider the same as approved.
Is there any objection? There being none, the motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, at this juncture, I move that we consider proposed Senate Resolution number 723, taking into consideration proposed Senate Resolution number 727 and 739. This is the resolution commending Little League Philippines Incorporated. So move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, the motion is approved. Consideration of proposed Senate Resolution number 723, taking into consideration proposed Senate Resolution number 727 and 739, is now in order. The Secretary will read the title and text of the resolution.
Resolution congratulating and commending Little League Philippines, Inc. for capturing the crown at the 2023 Junior League Softball World Series held in Kirkland, Washington on August 6, 2023.
Mr. President, I move to recognize our distinguished Senate President, Senator Juan Miguel Zubiri, to deliver the sponsorship speech. So move, Mr. President.
Senator Subiri is recognized to deliver his sponsorship speech.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, it is my great pride and honor to sponsor a resolution commending and congratulating our very own Bago City softball team for their big victory as the champions of the 2023 Junior League Softball World Series. Let me repeat, it's the World Series for the Junior League for softball. As a Negrense on my father's side, who hails from Kabangkalan, Barangay Talubangi, Your Honors, we are immensely proud of our girls from Bago City for representing not only Asia and the Pacific, as well as and the Philippines, but Negros Occidental as well, as they went undefeated for their whole Junior League run. Walang talo po, Mr. President. We salute the team for putting Negros Occidental back on top of the softball scene, as exactly 2 decades after Bacolod City took the crown home in 2003. So to our players, Erica Arnaiz, Therese Francine Fuentes, Ana Diana Buenafe, Aisel Tanaman, Ashley Ortiz, Frolin Manalo, Christine Jane Caracas, Daniela Bejos, Audrey Sarsona, Marie Antoinette Sicapore, Nice Lobrido, and Cassandra Sumatra. Maraming salamat. Madamo ginya salamat sa inyo. Saludo kami tanan sa inyo. We remain your steadfast champions and supporters, and we hope to see many more young women inspired by your win and empowered to pursue their own athletic dreams as well. As you can see, Mr. President, in the last few months, we've been honoring women athletes. Magagaling talaga ang mga kababaihan. So, once again, congratulations and thank you very much, Mr. President.
Mr. President, this representation is also an author. We filed a resolution, Senate Resolution number 723. I would just like to insert into the records this representation's co-sponsorship speech, as well as Senator Bongo's co-sponsorship speech.
Is there any objection? There being none, the motion is approved.
Mr. President, no other member wishes to interpolate or propose any amendments to the measure. I move that we adopt Senate Resolution number 723, taking into consideration proposed Senate Resolution number 727 and 739, subject to style. So move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, proposed Senate Resolution number 723, taking into consideration proposed Senate Resolution number 727 and 739, subject to style, is hereby adopted.
Thank you, Mr. President, and we congratulate our champions present here today.
Session suspended.
Before we
the
ask
session is
our...
Session's in order.
Resume.
What is it? What's the motion say? Okay. Hindi na suspend.
So we did not suspend. Yes, Mr. President. Mr. President, at this juncture, and before we ask our guests to approach the podium, we have another resolution commending our two heroes, Mr. President, James Aranas and Johan Chua. And so, Mr. President, with that, I move that we consider proposed Senate Resolution number 684, taking into consideration proposed Senate Resolution number 695 and 714. This is the resolution commending James Aranas and Johan Chua. So move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, the motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, may we ask the Secretary to read the title of the measure?
Resolution congratulating and commending James Aranas and Johan Chua for ruling the 2023 World Cup of Pool 9-Ball Championship held from June 27 to July 2, 2023 at the Pazo de Feiras e Congresos de Lugo in Lugo, Spain.
Mr. President, with the consent of the body, I move that we recognize the Senate Chairperson of the Senate Committee on Sports, Senator Christopher Bongo, to deliver the sponsorship speech.
Senator Bongo is recognized to deliver his sponsorship speech.
Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, as chairman of the Committee on Sports, it is my distinct honor and privilege to stand before you today to sponsor the Senate resolution congratulating and commending James Aranas and Johan Chua, who have brought immense pride and honor to our country for winning the 2023 World Cup of Pool. The 2023 World Cup of Pool is a prestigious pool doubles tournament participated in by 32 teams representing different countries, which was held from June 27 to July 2, 2023 in Spain. Despite facing tough competition from different participants all over the world, the duo have emerged victorious. This triumph holds a special significance as it marks the country's fourth World Cup of Pool Championship, thus ending a decade-long title drought since 2013. Their quest to victory was not achieved overnight, for it was the outcome of thorough preparation, unyielding commitment, and relentless perseverance. James Aranas and Johan Chua's remarkable achievement serves as a beacon of inspiration, reminding all Filipino athletes to chase their dreams with unwavering determination and passion. Of course, I also give recognition to the coaching staff, trainers, and mentors. You are vital to our athletes' success. Mr. President, as we proceed in this emerging generation of Filipino athletes, we must endeavor to consistently prioritize and advocate for the optimal welfare and best interests of our athletes. It is also incumbent upon us to diligently maintain the advancements we have attained in the global sports arena. Let us always be reminded of the hard work and sacrifices our Filipino athletes have made to make our country proud. Hindi po biro ang kanilang sakripisyo na ginagawa tuwing sila ay mag-ensayo. Ang iba po sa kanila ay kailangan mahiwalay sa kanilang mga pamilya at mahal sa buhay para lang makamit ang kanilang mga pangarap. At sa pag-abot ng kanilang mga pangarap, Mr. President, samahan at suportahan po natin sila sa kanilang paglalakbay para abutin ang kanilang minimithi, kasabay na mabigyang dangal at karangalan ng ating bansa. Once again, I would like to extend my sincerest congratulations to the both of you for exhibiting exceptional skill and talent. Your unwavering determination and dedication have set a remarkable example for all of us, demonstrating what can be achieved through hard work and perseverance. We look forward to your future achievements and continued success. Mabuhay kayo. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Go. Mr. President, may I just move that all the members of the Senate be made co-sponsor, co-author of this measure. So move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, this motion is approved.
Mr. President, no other member wishes to interpolate or propose any amendments to the measure. Mr. President, before I do that, may I also put into the records that the distinguished gentleman from San Juan, Senator Jinggoy Estrada, would like to just insert into the records his co-sponsorship speech. Mr. President, no other member wishes to interpolate or propose any amendments to the measure. I move that we adopt proposed Senate Resolution number 684, taking into consideration proposed Senate Resolution number 695 and 714, subject to style. So move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, proposed Senate Resolution number 684, taking into consideration proposed Senate Resolution number 695 and 714, subject to style, is hereby adopted.
Thank you very much. Again, we congratulate Sir James Aranas and Johan Chua. Mr. President, may I move for a minute suspension to allow our guests to go to the rostrum and receive the Senate commendation.
Session suspended.
President, this juncture, I move that we take up our privileged speeches, Mr. President. And with that, may I move that we recognize the distinguished gentleman from the province of Davao and Isabela, no other than our idol, Senator Raffy Tulfo, to deliver his privileged speech.
To our distinguished colleague from the great provinces of Isabela and Davao, and our idol Raffy, Senator Raffy Tulfo is recognized.
Maraming salamat, Mr. President. Mr. President, my dear colleagues, kagabi po, ako po ay pumunta sa isang lamay ng isang binata sa Nabotas na bago siya binawian ng buhay, punong-puno po siya ng pangarap para sa kanyang sarili at sa kanyang pamilya. Ito po ay si Jerod Jemboy Baltasar na pinatay ng mga Navotas PNP dahil sa mistaken identity. Ayan po siya. Kung mararapatin niyo po, I would like to share a short video of my conversation with the mother of Jemboy. Meron po tayong video.
Na po, pumunta rin po doon na. Meron pong mga SWAT na po, pumunta rin po doon na. Nakatutok po doon sa bangka. Ang inaano ko, baka SWAT po yung nakapatay sa anak ko kasi sa ulo po yung tama niya.
Mahinang audio.
Dapat po yung nangyari, mga alauna po. Posible po hindi nila nakilala yung anak ko. Sana po tinanong nila kung ano yung pangalan ng anak ko. Sir, sasali ko na rin po yung, di ba po patay na yung anak ko, nakalagay po siya sa styrofoam. Nandun po yung mga polis, meron po lalaki bumaba, hinila pa po yung anak ko sa may burak. Tapos po, ang ginawa niya, pinag-isipan niya po pa po yung anak ko. Meron po talaga nakakita na patay na yung anak ko, pinag-isipan niya po, tapos may balak siyang parang babaunan niya pa ng droga yung anak ko. Meron po mga...
Nakakadurog po ng puso at nakakagalit ang sinapit niya sa kamay ng ating mga kapulisan. Mistaken identity. Kumbaga, sa mga pulis, pasensya na, kala namin ibang tao ka. Hindi po ba dapat lahat tayo tumatayo ngayon para kay Jimboy na nilapastangan ng ating criminal and justice system? Lumapit po sa aking programa ang lola ni Jimboy nung nakarang linggo at pinatutukan ko ang kaso niya. Napag-alaman po namin na napakaraming kalokohan at kawalangian nangyari dito sa kaso ni Jimboy. Sa dami ng panukalang batas na pinapasa natin dito, parang pagdating sa field at sa mga operations ng pulis, ito ay binabaliwala. Binibigyan natin sila ng budget na pambili ng mga armas para maprotektahan ang ating mga kababayan. Pero anong nangyari? Ang mga armas na binili ng ating buwis ang mismong kikitil ng buhay natin. Bibigyan natin sila ng otoridad upang panatilihin ang seguridad at kapayapaan, pero sila mismo ang sanhi ng takot at gulo at pag-asik ng lagim. Mr. President, itong nakarang Lunes sa pamumuno ng Chairman ng Committee on Public Order na si Senator Bato de la Rosa ay inimbestigahan ang pagpaslang kay Apari Vice Mayor Romel Alameda at iba pa niyang kasamahan. Marami po tayong natutunan sa hearing na yun at kung anong mga batas ang dapat ipasa. Sa katunayan, umuusad na po ang ating bill na body-worn camera, CCTV sa mga jails at prisons at ang Checkpoint Regulation Act. Pero, nais ko po ulit kumatok sa pinto at sa puso ninyo, lalo na sa Committee on Public Order at kay Senator Bato. Sana po ay maimbestigahan din po natin ang nangyari kay Jimboy. Ang kaso niya at ang nangyayari sa kanyang pamilya ay siyang nangyayari sa mas nakararami nating mga kababayan. Mr. President and my dear colleagues, our criminal justice system is not the same for the rich, powerful, and influential as to what is being applied to our ordinary citizens, most especially the poor and the powerless. Let me lay down a few of the issues that I hope will be addressed. First, the operations procedure. There is a selective application of the PNP operational procedures. I commend the PNP for having a very extensive and well-written manual, as you can see in the presentation. Napakaganda po ng mga nakalagay. Napakaganda kung ito ay nasusunod at pinatutupad sa lahat ng sitwasyon at kahit sino pa ang kaharap nila. In the 2021 revised PNP Operational Procedures Manual, they introduced the use of force continuum policy. Here we see the three approaches for the use of force continuum, starting with non-lethal approach, moving to less lethal approach, then going to lethal approach. Makikita po dito na ang kada sitwasyon na kinakaharap ng ating mga kapulisan ay may akmang aksyon na dapat gamitin. Sa kaso po ni Jimboy, isang 17-year-old na nasa bangka at balak lang mangisda, sa kataasan ng araw, walang armas at hindi naman ng laban. Dumiretso agad sa lethal approach ang ating mga pulis. Ang lethal approach po ay ginagamit kung armed at dangerous po ang suspect at kung may unlawful aggression or intention to cause severe injury, serious bodily harm or death to police officers and other people. Kahit balibalik na rin po natin ang kwento ni Jimboy, paano magiging threat itong bata na ito sa isang grupo ng kapulisan na armado ng mga M16 at 9mm. According to the PNP manual, the use of handguns and rifles are authorized only to prevent or repel the unlawful aggression.
Nandun po yung mga polis. Meron po lalaki bumaba. Inilap po yung anak ko sa may burak. Tapos
According to the
ang
PNP manual,
ginawa niya, pinag-isipan niya po
hitting
yung
the head.
anak ko. Meron po talaga nakakita na. Patay na yung anak ko. Pinag-isipan niya po. Tapos may balak siya. Parang babaunan niya pa ng droga yung anak ko.
Si Jimboy.
Meron po mga SWAT.
Tama din po ang warning shots.
Pumunta rin po doon na nakatutok po doon sa bangka. Ano ko baka
Outnumbered.
nakapatay sa ano ko kasi sa ulo ko yung tama niya eh. Sa katangaling tapat po yung nangyari. Mga alauna po. Posible po hindi nila nakilala yung anak ko. Sana po tinanong nila kung ano yung pangalan ng anak ko. Sa kasi sasali ko na rin po yung, di ba po patay na yung anak ko, nakalagay po siya sa styrofoam. Nandun po yung mga polis, meron po lalaki bumaba, inilap po yung anak ko sa may burak. Ang ginawa niya, pinag-isipan niya po pa po yung anak ko. Meron po talaga nakakita na, patay na yung anak ko, pinag-isipan niya po, tapos may bakit siyang, parang babaunan niya pa ng droga yung anak ko. Meron po mga SWAT na ano, pumunta rin po doon na nakatutok po doon sa bangka. Ang inaano ko baka spot yung nakapatay sa anak ko kasi sa ulo ko yung tama niya. Sa katangaling po yung nangyari. Mga alauna po. Hindi po hindi nila nakilala yung anak ko. Sana po tinanong nila kung ano yung pangalan ng anak ko. Sa kasi sasali ko na po yung di ba patay na yung anak ko. Nakalagay po siya sa styrofoam. Nandun po yung mga polis. Meron po lalaki baba. Inilap po yung anak ko sa may burak. Tapos po, ang ginawa niya, pinag-isipan niya po yung anak ko. Meron po talaga nakakita na, patay na yung anak ko, pinag-isipan niya po. Tapos may balak siyang, parang babaunan niya pa ng droga yung anak ko.
Ang mga pulis.
Meron po mga SWAT na ano, na pumunta rin po doon na nakatutok po doon sa
You
bangka.
explain, Mr. President, the PNP manual
Po
is
yung nakapatay sa
unfavorable.
ano ko kasi sa ulo po yung tama niya eh.
Why all
Aling tapat po yung nangyari.
training or
Una
retraining
po, posible po hindi nila
continue
nakilala yung ano ko. Sana po tinanong nila kung ano yung pangalan ng
training
anak ko.
in techniques
Sa kasi sasali ko na rin po yung, di pa po patay na yung anak ko, nakalagay po niya sa styrofoam. Nandun po yung mga polis, meron po lalaki bumaba, hinila pa po yung anak ko sa
sapat na training ng mga PNP officers natin sa mga
niya,
ito.
pinag-isipan niya po pa po yung anak ko. Meron po talaga nakakita na,
Sila parati sa
pinag-isipan niya po, tapos may balak siyang parang
training and verbal
droga yung anak ko.
body joint manipulation.
Meron po mga SWAT na ano, na pumunta rin po doon na nakatutok po doon sa bangka. Na ano ko baka po yung nakapatay sa anak ko kasi sa ulo ko yung tama niya eh. Sa tangaling tapat po yung nangyari. Mga alauna po. Posible po hindi nila nakilala yung anak ko. Sana tinanong nila kung ano yung pangalan ng anak ko. Sa kasi sasali ko na rin po yung ipapatay na yung anak ko.
Expert sa martial arts. And he knows that. We also need to equip them with weapons so they could implement the less lethal approach when needed. These impact weapons include batons, truncheons, tasers, or pepper spray, or even arnis. And of course, proper training so that these equipments could be used in a calibrated way and not to cause serious injury or death. Another flaw in the operations conducted by the PNP is the fact that the body-worn camera of the PNP was unfortunately turned off or intentionally turned off. As mentioned earlier, the body-worn camera bill is already moving. The police officer in charge of the equipment must ensure that it is functioning or an alternative recording device is used at all times, or else he will be held liable criminally. Such act should be considered as tampering of evidence. Kung nakabukas lang po sana ang kamera ng pulis, edi sana mas madaling na isampa ang tamang kaso laban sa mga pumatay kay Jimboy. At isa pang sabwata na nadiskubi po ay ang pagtanggi ng investigador na iparapintes ang 6 na pulis na involved sa operasyon. Bakit pag ordinaryong tao ang akusado, hayok na hayok sila sa pagdiin ng mga krimen? Minsan, nagpaplanta pa ng ebidensya. Pero dito, ginagawang lahat upang sanggain ang investigasyon dahil kabaro nila ang sangkot. And as if the death of Jimboy is not enough, the road to justice proves to be difficult yet again for Jimboy's family, as with most cases where the victims are poor and powerless. Sa unang pag-imbestiga, ang 6 na pulis na sangkot sa pagkamatay ni Jinggoy ay sasampahan lang ng complaint for reckless imprudence resulting in homicide. Sampal sa pamilya ni Jimboy ito. Aksidente lang pagkamatay niya? Parang nasagasaan lang sa kalye? Sinong niloloko nyo? Mga lespo. If we permit this kind of reasoning in Jimboy's case, it will be like a free pass for all abusive police officers to shoot whomever they want and claim mistaken identity. My office is preparing a bill that would ensure strict compliance with the PNP Operations Manual, particularly for law enforcement operations, including the use of force continuum. This bill will hold law enforcers liable for deaths and injuries during law enforcement operations in violation of the PNP procedures. Mr. President, my dear colleagues, we have punished the crime for plunder. Ang plunder po ay pagnanakaw lang talaga, pero binigyan natin ito ng matinding kaparusahan dahil ang nagnakaw ay public official at pera ng bayan ang ninakaw. Sa panukalang batas na ipapasa ko, hindi simpleng reckless imprudence resulting in homicide ang kaparusahan sa mga pulis na pumapatay habang nilalabag ang operations procedure nila. Dapat po sila ay may mas mabigat na kaparusahan. They are paid to protect, yet they are the ones threatening the lives of our citizens. We arm them using tax money, and yet they use it against the people they are sworn to protect. This deserves a grave penalty. We have to enforce our laws on our law enforcers. Mr. President, my dear colleagues, my heart goes to the family of Jimboy. But you know, it also pains me to castigate our police officers all the time. Kasi po, karamihan naman sa kanila ay nasa ayos ang pagsiservisyo. Nadudungisan lang ng ilan o kulang lang ng suporta mula sa itaas. Let us work together to elevate our law enforcers. They should be respected and not feared. With the help of Senator Bato de la Rosa and everyone here in the Senate, I know maayos din po natin ito. Maraming salamat po, Mr. President.
Maraming salamat, Senator Rafi.
Mr. President, if I may, I know that we are pressed for time, and I just have one question. If my distinguished colleague, Senator Tulfo, would yield to just one question, Mr. President. First of all, Mr. President, let me take this opportunity to extend my sincerest condolences to the family left behind by Jemboy Baltazar. My thoughts and prayers are with you all. Secondly, Mr. President, I joined the gentleman from Isabela and Davao in strongly condemning the brutal killing of Jemboy Salazar, a 17-year-old who dreams of becoming a seaman someday, Mr. President. Just have one question, if my distinguished colleague would yield just one question with regard to the seemingly, Mr. President, paulit-ulit na nakakasama ng loob, nakakasalukasok ng mga pangyayari na nagagawa. I'm sure hindi ito sinasadya, pero nagagawa, nakocommit pa rin ng kapulisan. If the gentleman would know if in the past 5 years perhaps, police violence na nag-lead sa kamatayan, mistaken identity, may numero ho ba tayo nito para sabihin ito ay talagang parang wala hong nangyayari? Kasi kahit sabihin po na babaguhin na naman natin yung manual, etc. Mr. President, I just would like to put on record, and you, Mr. President, and I are authors of resolution investigating the killing, Mr. President, if you would recall, the 17-year-old Kian Lloyd de los Santos. Mr. President, he was killed in the same day, today, August 16, 2017. Same day, 6 years ago, Mr. President. He was shot 3 times in the head despite begging for his life. Yung 19-year-old po, si Carlo Angelo Arnaiz, who was handcuffed, beaten up before being killed. And Carl's friend and witness to the murder, yung 14-year-old, si Reynaldo de Guzman, whose body was found floating in a creek with 31 stab wounds. All these killings, Mr. President, were committed by the Caloocan City Police. So, Ginoong Pangulo, may distinguished colleague, may data na po ba tayo kaya? Kung ilang beses na po itong nangyayari, baka kung i-impose natin ng death penalty, ito yung unahin natin.
Maraming salamat, Your Honor, Mr. President, for that question. As far as data is concerned, no, we don't have that. And certainly, the policemen or the PNP would not ever give us those numbers. On the other hand, let me tell you, Mr. President, Your Honor, the reason bakit hindi ito mapahinto, paulit-ulit na lang, you said, and I agree with you totally, through the years, it happens again and again and again. And the thing here that I saw, the main problem is doon po sa recruitment. Kasi it starts with the recruitment process. Dapat nasasara talaga yung mga hindi karapat-dapat mag-training at yung mga pulis na dapat hindi na maisalang at maging patrolman pa or starts from the bottom, maging kabo. Why? Because marami dito, marami sa mga kapulisan natin ang may topak. Sorry for the word. May sira sa ulo. Pero nakakalusot dahil malakas nirekomenda ng mga Poncio Pilato. So, nakakalusot sila na dapat doon pa lamang sa screening process, nasara na sila. Meron nga tayong tinatawag na neuropsychiatric exam, pero ito nga po, Mr. President, I remember many years ago, yung isa pong colonel sa Camp Crame, siya po yung nagkakandak ng neuropsychiatric exam sa mga gustong mag-training sa pagka-PNP. Siya mismo ay saksakan ng abusado at inireklamo po sa aking programa. Kung yung mismo nagsasagawa ng neuropsychiatric exam para sa mga gustong mag-training sa pagka-pulis, ang mismo may topak sa ulo, then nakikita niyo na po yung maging problema. At ito pa po masakit, noong panahon po ni PRD, ni President Rodrigo Duterte, dinoble ang sweldo ng mga pulis natin. So inakala po natin lahat kapag nadoble na ang kanilang sweldo, gaganda na ang kanilang serbisyo, pero lalong lumala. Saan po yung problema rito? Again, hindi po nasara yung pagpasok ng mga pulis na kung saan-saan lamang nanggaling at pagdating sa training, sila ay tinulak lamang na maging pulis ng kanilang mga padrino at hanggang sa makapasok sila maging PNP. So it is time na dapat yung mga pulis natin is quality, not quantity. So again, Mr. President, akin pong tututukan ito to make sure itong mga ginagawang pang-abuso nating kapulisan, masisilip ko at maparusahan ang dapat maparusahan.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I certainly agree with the observations made by our distinguished colleague yung sa recruitment.
Mr. President, okay. May binigay isang staff ko, 6,000 police killings in general.
Wow.
Between 2016 to 2021. Pero this is in general. Hindi dito kasama yung killings dahil sa mistaken identity, killings dahil sa pang-abuso, killings dahil sa salvage. So ito ay general lamang. So yung tinatanong niyo po ata is yung specific to police brutality. Ito po, General to.
Thank you, Mr. President. And as I was saying, Mr. President, I agree with you that we should scrutinize yung mga papasok, and at the same time, yung mga nakapasok na, dapat na-check din. Kasi sabi nga nila, power corrupts, and it corrupts absolutely. When you have that power, at the same time, Mr. President, kung papahawakin natin sila ng baril, hindi ho dapat napapasakamay ng may topak ang baril na binili mismo. Binanggit nyo ho kanina, yun ang napakasakit. Imagine, taxpayer po yung nagbayad nitong mga armas na ito na kumitil sa buhay ng mga kabataan natin na walang kamalay-malay. I am not making a sweeping judgment sa kapulisan natin. Hindi lahat ganun. I don't believe marami sa kanila pang ganun. Ngunit meron talagang bad eggs na kailangang i-address natin itong problemang ito, Ginoong Pangula. And as I promised, I only have one issue. Yun lang po, yung data doon. And again, I would like to remind the body that 6 years ago, August 16, the same day, 2017, pinatay ang 17-year-old na si Kian Lloyd de Los Santos. Mr. President, how many more of our youth should suffer as a consequence of our law enforcers' reckless actions? So we are calling our government, our law enforcement, the DILG, to look into this, into the procedures and protocols of our law enforcement officers to prevent a similar incident from happening again. Maraming salamat, Ginoong Pangulo. Maraming salamat, Senator Tulfo.
May dagdag ko lang, Mr. President, Your Honor. Ang sinasuggest ko rin, on a yearly basis, kailangan sumailalim yung ating mga pulis sa tinatawag na neuropsychiatric exam at random drug test. Kasi nga, ang nangyari ngayon, minsan lang sila neuropsychiatric exam and then after that, go na sila, libre na sila. Kasi pwedeng pumasa sila nung time ng kanilang recruitment, pero after a year or two, nagbago yung kanilang situation because of anxiety, stress sa trabaho, pagod. So doon na pumasok yung pagkakaroon nilang topak sa ulo. So kapag regular ang kanilang pag-undergo ng neuropsychiatric exam, mahuhuli po yun, masasara sila. So pwede silang muna papahingayin at magamot. Thank you,
Mr. President,
Yes, Senator Escudero, sir.
may I make a brief manifestation so as not to belabor the point given that Senator Villar will be sponsoring. I just want to take advantage of my rare presence in plenary. Mr. President,
Let it be placed on record, Mr. President.
I subscribe completely to the statements and the speech of Senator Tulfo, and I join him in his desire for justice for the victim and in calling out not only the policemen involved but the entire Philippine National Police. What struck me, Mr. President, was the statement made by the good gentleman with respect to magkabaro kasi at pinoprotektahan nila ang mga sarili nila. Mr. President, more than the neuro, I think the leadership of the PNP, the DILG, and even the DOJ should set the tone insofar as making these police officers accountable, if only to make them as examples, that the basic rules on engagement as it applies to civilians also applies to members of the Philippine National Police. They can only shoot and fire upon and even kill someone in self-defense only. Hindi porkit kriminal, nagnakaw, may pinatay, may ginahasa, nakita mo naglalakad palayo, kahit gaano kalala yung krimen niyang ginawa, pwede mo nang barilin at patayin kung wala namang panganib sa buhay mo mismo nung tinatangka mong hulihin o habulin siya. Sa kasong ito, kung hindi ako nagkakamali, Ginoong Pangulo, nasa laot yung binaril nila. Wala namang hawak na armas. Malayo sa kanila. At ni walang panganib sa buhay nila. Makatakas na kung makakatakas, pero hindi sila pinapayagan ng batas. Naputokan, lalo na barilin at patayin. The rules of engagement are quite clear. And I do not understand why Philippine National Police members, whatever rank, whenever they entered, whether they passed the neuro or not, cannot understand that and put that in their thick heads. they should try to arrest, but if he escapes and runs, hindi niya pwedeng putukan kahit sa paa para madapa at mahuli niya, because still, there was no threat to his life that he needed to defend himself. The reason, Mr. President, why we gave our law enforcement personnel guns was not to shoot anyone who they think is guilty of a crime. Only a judge can decide that. The purpose and reason why they have guns is to protect themselves and to protect the civilian population from violent criminals. It is not a license to shoot anyone that they think is either guilty, even if he is actually guilty of having committed a crime. During the budget deliberations, I will join the distinguished gentleman in asking accountability from the PNP, not only the PNP, also the DLG, also the DOJ, especially insofar as the kind and nature of the offense or crime they will be filing against these police officers. It cannot be merely abandonment of a victim, for sure, Mr. President, Your Honor. It cannot be merely violation of PNP standard operating procedures and protocols. This is either homicide or murder. And nothing prevents the prosecutor evaluating this case in preliminary investigation from filing a case for murder, because it can always be lowered to homicide. But filing a case for homicide can never be elevated to murder. Filing a case, Mr. President, for a similar act of abandoning a victim cannot be elevated to murder anymore. A safer recourse on the part of the DOJ would be to file the higher offense, because anyway, the policeman can be convicted of a lower offense should the evidence point to the lower offense. I submit, Mr. President, and I thank the gentleman for the time he allocated to me.
Thank you for your manifestation, Your Honor, Mr. President. Thank you.
Senator Risa Ontiveros is also
Yes, Mr. President.
raising her hands.
Salamat kayo, Mr. President. Bilang pagsuporta po sa privileged speech ng good gentleman mula sa Isabela, maikling imamanifest ko lang po unang-una na tulad nila, nakikiramay ako sa pamilya ni Jemboy Baltazar. And Mr. President, I welcome the decision of the PNP IAS to file administrative charges against and relieve the Navotas police chief who covered up the involvement of police officers in the killing of Jemboy Baltazar. However, while this is a first step towards accountability, relief from position is not justice. It is appalling that at least 11 police officers committed an overkill shooting of one 17-year-old boy. Standard procedure po ba para sa police officers na mag-shoot on site at hindi tangkaing i-aresto yung tao? Kita naman po natin sa use of force continuum ang sagot. Therefore, I urge the Ombudsman and the Department of Justice to further investigate the Navotas police chief and police officers for obstruction of justice after it was discovered they had altered the report on Jemboy's death to remove the names of the 11 officers. Oras ng sampahan ng kasong kriminal ang mga pulis na inaabuso ang kapangyarihan nila para maiwasan ang saklaw ng batas. Like the minority leader, I will file a resolution to urge a Senate investigation on this issue. Also in the spirit of the privileged speech of the good gentleman from Isabela, para maisiwalat na ang mga cover-up operations na tila binabastos ang integridad ng PNP at lalo na ng taong bayan. Finally, beyond this specific case, Mr. President, the Senate should consider investigating if similar tactics have been used in other police operations. In addition to the Supreme Court's rules requiring police body cams, we will also explore the possibility of legislation which will penalize police officers who fail to turn on their body cams during operations, perhaps as a companion measure to the bill of the good gentleman from Isabela. Today, On the death anniversary of Kian de los Santos, we are reminded of the urgent action we need to take for the many young lives we've lost to trigger happy and cruel cops. Muli po, Mr. President, pakikiramay sa pamilya ni Jemboy Baltasar. Oh, and lastly, Mr. President, the 6,000 killings cited by the good gentleman from Isabela are the killings acknowledged by the Philippine National Police in the course of the bloody war on drugs. Salamat po. Salamat kayo, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, my distinguished colleague. And we'd like to also congratulate Senator Raffy Tulfo for taking this up on the floor today and in the consciousness of each and every senator. Pinapanood ko nga yung news gabi-gabi at yan pong laman ng news. Naawa po ako nung unang nakita ko po yung kanyang nanay na umiiyak via Zoom nung nandun pa siya sa Middle East. Napakasakit para sa mga OFWs natin na malaman na ganun lamang ang pagka-disgrasya na kanilang mga anak dito sa ating bansa. And in other countries that would have courted condemnation. In other countries like in France, when a teenager was killed by the police, they had 2 weeks of rioting. Talaga nagkagulo-gulo dun because he was a immigrant boy na binaril ng police na nagkagulo-gulo. In the United States, they launched the Black Lives Matter movement. There was a lot of movements in the United States dahil sa pag-aabuso ng mga police. Kaya tama lang po ito na dapat talaga magkaroon po tayo ng review ng kanilang manuals, training manuals. I'm fully supportive of our armed services. I'm a very strong supporter of rule of law. But that is the whole point, rule of law. There are laws and procedures to be followed. So the law enforcers should also follow the rules of the law. Hindi po, they cannot take the law into their own hands. Kaya tignan natin, meron na po tayong dashcam, meron po tayong pending dashcam bill. Taasan natin yung parusa pag nakasirado po ang yung mga dashcams na ibibigay natin sa police. Sa ibang bansa, tanggal ka agad yun. Pag in-off nila yung dashcam po nila, tanggal automatic yan sa serbisyo sa Estados Unidos. May mga states na ganun. So we can do many things to correct this. Pero nakikiramay po kami sa pamilya ni Jemboy and sana po wala na po mangyayaring ganito sa ating mga kababayan. I hope in the near future. So we thank you for your vigilance on this and taking this up in the plenary today.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. President, the minority leader is also seeking the floor. I move that he be recognized, Senator Coco Pimentel.
Our distinguished minority floor leader is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, congratulations sa ating kasama rito, ang ating idol, dahil sa na-take up natin itong topic na ito. Although, nag-file na po ako ng resolution to
Yes, I saw it. We read it today.
this killing. Tayo po yung nakikiramay nga sa pamilya ni Jemboy Baltasar. Pero itong usapan na kailangan ayusin, i-review, i-update ang Police Manual of Procedures, naririnig ko na po ito sa panahon pa ng tatay ko na ito, topic na po, and nabisita nga actually yung Police Manual of Operations, pero iba kasi yung reality versus, or theory versus practice, Mr. President. So, even if may manual sila, dapat siguro, daan-daanan nila, siguro doon maintindihan po nila anong, not only the letter of what is there, but the spirit, bakit nandun yung rules na yon. So siguro, pag hearing po ng aking resolution, together with the privileged speech, i-telegraph na natin yung iti-take up natin sa kapulisan, itong pagpatay kay insidente na napatay si Jemboy Baltasar, the Police Manual of Operations, pati Mr. President, pati yung mga iba, para pakita natin sa kanila, we're aware of the, although kay Jemboy yung resolution, pati iba, nalala ko yata, yung mga napatay just because nag-violate sa checkpoint. Ilan yan? Kahit meron nung quarantine period, merong yata nag-violate din ng parang ng line na lumampas sa line. Patay din. Ako, naalala ko pa nga itong sa Parañaque. Di ba? Mag-ama. Pinaulan na ng bala kasi yung sasakyan, yun yung sasakyan ng suspect. Oh. Same model. Same model yan.
Mistaken identity.
I mean, paulit-ulit eh. Ano pa ba isa? Sa may Quezon City ba yun? Ganun din. Sasakyan dahil sa ang pag-describe, ito yung sasakyan. Lahat ba ng sasakyan na ganun? Papaulanan na nila ng bala. Ang namatay yata dun sa Quezon City is rinarush sa hospital eh. So, lahat po na ito, I mean, balikan po natin para makita natin na all lives are important. These incidents will never be forgotten. And there is a time for, there's a time for reckoning eh. Yes. Darating ang panahon na kailangan pong harapin yung consequences ng mga nangyari. So, thank you, Senator Tulfo, for bringing this up.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr.
Timing
President,
po
thank you.
yung speech ninyo, Senator Raffy Tulfo, dahil nag-file nga po ng resolution si Senator Coco Pimentel. We just referred it to the Committee on Public Order and Security together with the Committee on Justice. So, dagdag ko lang po, Senator, our Minority Floor Leader, yung mga ginagawa po nilang mga raid, yung ginagawa po nila mga action, pag tinignan niyo po sila, naka-civilian po sila, wala po tayong nakikitang pulis na signage, wala yung tsapa. Pero mo nakakatakot yun. Sir, this could be considered an armed group. How would you know if pulis yung kausap mo o hindi? Diba? Nakakatakot talaga. Kaya kailangan na talagang magkaroon ng standard operating procedures and they must follow it to the letter. Another information to the body, we're also going to tackle the panay lobby dito ng police hierarchy, yung PNP modernization bill. So, pwede natin isingit din dyan. Yung mga panukala, mga plano po natin para mapatibay po ang pagrespeto ng batas, lalo na sa pagdating sa police operations.
Yeah, Mr. President, thank you. If I may add, I do agree with Senator Chis Escudero said a while ago, every time an incident like this happens, dapat we should also always call the attention of the DILG and the PNP, the Chief of Police, the Chief PNP, dahil sila naman po ang gumagawa ng mga policy at procedures. So, dapat pag may nangyaring naulit tong ganitong insidente, pati sila meron pananagutan, pati sila dapat magpaliwanag sa atin. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. With that, I move that we refer the privileged speech of Senator Tulfo and the interpellations and manifestations thereon to the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs and the Committee on Justice and Human Rights. So move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, motion is approved.
Mr. President, at this juncture, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 1846. This is the Bill on Internet Transactions Act of 2022. So move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, motion is approved.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of the measure is that we reopen the interpellations to allow the members to ask questions on the substitute bill. And so with that, I move to recognize the sponsor of the measure, the chairman of the Senate Committee on Trade, Senator Mark Villar, and to continue with his interpellation, our Minority Leader, Senator Aquilino Coco Pimentel III.
The distinguished sponsor, Senator Mark Villar, is recognized, and to interpolate the distinguished Minority Floor Leader, Senator Aquilino Coco Pimentel III.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the permission of our sponsor, this representation, I'd like to continue with this interpellation. Mr. President, we are already considering a substitute bill, right? But given the past interpellations, is the sponsor still open to some substantive amendments even of that substitute bill, Mr. President?
Yes, we are open to amendments, Your Honor. Thank you.
We have studied, Mr. President, the structure of the DTI. The DTI currently has a Fair Trade Enforcement Bureau and a Consumer Policy Advocacy Bureau. And actually, also an e-commerce bureau. An e-commerce division. Division siya ngayon. Ano? Our bill makes the e-commerce division a bureau. Now, given the anong section ba yung functions ba? Given the functions of the e-commerce bureau, wouldn't this e-commerce bureau just be ano tawag, repeating some of the functions of the FTEB and the CPAB, Mr. President? Section 7.
Well, the DTI has a policy of accepting no wrong door policy. And of course, each division has its own specific purpose, but at the same time, certainly if there's a consumer who reports in any of those three bureaus, the DTI will still respond to the request.
So, will the DTI adjust the functions and jurisdiction of the two existing bureaus, which I just mentioned, if this becomes law, Mr. President? Or as is lang talaga, as is lang sila?
They won't change any of the existing bureaus, but this bill will strengthen. For instance, just an example. For instance, the e-commerce division now has only 11 people. So this bill will give it more teeth by making it a bureau.
If there are consumer complaints, as of today, these are handled by what bureau in the DTI?
The Fair Trade Enforcement Bureau, and there's the Fair Trade Enforcement.
So even when the complaint is arising out of an online transaction, which arm of the DTI will take cognizance of the complaint?
Yes, if it's internet related, there is the e-commerce office. And
Okay, so that is practiced now. So that has been taken out of the FTEB jurisdiction, Mr. President, because
I'm just talking of the existence of the office. But of course, primarily now, it is handled by the Free Trade Office. Fair Trade Office.
yes,
Fair
the
Trade
Fair
Enforcement Office.
Trade Enforcement Bureau. FTEB.
Yes,
Sige,
correct.
Let's
That
use the acronym na FTEB.
FTB.
Okay, kaya nga, when this bill becomes law, such a complaint, a similar complaint, will now be handled by the e-commerce bureau or still by the FTEB?
No, if and when this law is passed, it will be handled by the e-commerce bureau. And it will refer, in this bureau, this e-commerce bureau will then refer it to the relevant agency.
Yeah, we saw that section where we saw that particular provision that the e-commerce bureau will refer it to the relevant to the appropriate, the words are appropriate government agency. So is there a scenario, a possibility where a complaint is given to the e-commerce bureau and it will refer it to the Fair Trade Enforcement Bureau?
Yes, it will refer. Yes, that is a possible scenario.
So why do we need that initial step, Mr. President, that the consumer should first complain with the e-commerce bureau?
Well, the e-commerce bureau is needed, one, to address the fragmented nature of handling consumer complaints against unscrupulous online sellers. The e-commerce bureau can institutionalize mechanisms and employ technology for efficient tracking and across all agencies of government.
Bakit kasi FTEB pa rin? Saan dyan? Yeah. So, what would be the improvements, Mr. President, to be felt by our consumers if this bill becomes law? Sa ngayon pa lang, sinasabi na natin na si FTEB can handle consumer complaints whether offline transactions or analog transactions and online transactions. So, from the point of the consumer, ano po yung pagbabago na parang promised by our bill to address his consumer concerns, like if na feeling niya na loko siya, na shortchange siya, may bago bang body siyang napuntahan, parehas din pala. Mas bibilis ba yung procedure? Baka kasing bilis lang din naman pala. Ano po yung immediately mararamdaman po ng ating mga consumers?
Immediately, Your Honor, magkakaroon ng enhancement yung mga existing bureaus or departments na naka-identify para sa mga complaints ng ating mga consumers. So immediately magkakaroon ng enhancement. Like the e-commerce bureau will receive additional plantilla items, much more than what they have now. And at the same time, in this bill, there will be a central list of these online retailers, these online merchants, which I think is very important also because the importance of the e-commerce bureaus in the tracking, in the monitoring, which is very, I would say, very lacking now, given the size and the potential of the online market. So through this bill, we will see an enhancement of the existing bureaus and parts of the agency that are assigned to e-commerce enforcement. At the same time, we'll see improved monitoring through the means of this online business registry, which is something that's not present now. So if there is a complaint, a lot of these merchants they don't even know what the address is. So I think that's very important in the bill. And of course, the powers, the teeth that is given to the DTI, which is to take down any, that it has the power to do a takedown of site that is deemed as, with certain conditions, of course, when it is deemed to be imminent, dangerous or injurious to the consumer.
Sige po. So at least this e-commerce bureau will now be managing this online business registry, no? Envision natin diyan kung kunyari Shopee has 300,000 vendors, Lazada has 500,000 vendors, dalawa lang po itong pinag-usapan natin, pinakasikat na mga platform. So that means not less than 800,000 vendors details na po yung nasa online business registry. Yun po ba yung mangyayari?
Yes.
And then, nag-agree po ba tayo sa last time when I was interpolating that the online business registry will be made accessible to the public with or without a pending complaint?
Yes, we agreed, but I guess in a way we have to also, we are open to that amendment. We just want to make sure that we also respect existing privacy laws. So transparency is, of course, important to us, and we are willing to listen for any possible amendments regarding that issue.
Sige po. But when I was brainstorming on this measure with my staff, siyempre ako, Mr. President, limitado na rin yung pag-access ko sa mga online. Kung nakabili na ako successfully sa isa, doon na lang ako para hindi ko na kailangan matutunan yung iba't ibang platforms. Marami pa pala iba. May mga carousel, may mga, ano pa ba iba sabi nyo sa akin? Pati daw sa TikTok, pwede na magbenta eh. Ngayon, Instagram, Facebook, pwede daw magbenta. Ngayon, ang problema natin, Mr. President, ngayon is sa dami because of the use of the internet and all of these apps and even social media or social or community sites, the technology is facilitating the commission of fraud, the perpetration of fraud. Ngayon, some of those I have talked to have been victimized by a vendor directly selling to the victim, and might be categorized as a ano yun si? Consumer to consumer transaction, which we don't intend to be covered by this bill.
No,
Mr. President.
it's not intended to be covered.
Okay.
C2C, that's what we call C2C.
So, can we not find a way to cover a C2C, which is actually a sales? It's a sales transaction over the internet. So it's still an internet transaction, Mr. President. Ilan na naloko? C2C or
Well, it's, Your Honor, it's already covered by the Consumer Act. So we feel that that's sufficient sufficient in order to enforce such instances. And the e-commerce bureau can assist in any such instances.
Tapos anong ending? No, lack of information. Yes, some of the victims, Mr. President, have, of course, wanted to vindicate their rights. Kasi medyo malaki-laki rin yung financial damage po sa kanila, hahabulin nila.
Yes.
But sometimes they reach a dead end, Mr. President. Lack of information as to that vendor who sold them something which led to the scam or to the estafa, Mr. President. So, the principle, the idea is the same, Mr. President.
Your Honor, if I can just add in relation to that question, it's important that we have a mechanism to also assist the consumer in identifying where the complaints. I think that's why the e-commerce bureau is very important, because it will direct the complaint of the customer to the relevant agency or department. Right now, there's many definitions. There are different types of transactions that fall under different laws. So the e-commerce bureau will assist the consumer in finding which department is the relevant department for that particular concern. So I think to address that concern, I think that's why we have this that's why it's important to pass this bill, so we don't put the burden on the consumer of searching for where he has to go to regarding his particular transaction. He can just go to the e-commerce bureau, and whatever the transaction may be, the e-commerce bureau will assist him in finding what the relevant agency is who will service his concern.
Yes, actually we already have an e-commerce division, and I believe they're also doing that as of the moment. Part na po yun, yung referring online transaction complaints to the proper government agency. Ginagawa na po ngayon yan, and yet some of our victims, or many, or most of the victims, do not get redress for their grievances, and they're compensated for their damages, Mr. President, because of lack of information as to who victimized them, the whereabouts of that entity or person who victimized them. That's a good feature now of our bill because of the online business registration, but we're limiting it to vendors who are organized as businesses for selling, Mr. President. Sana, if we could find a way to extend it to even the one-off selling. Pero hindi rin tayo sure dun eh. Isa lang yung nakausap mo na victim ng tao, but I'm sure inulit na nung tao yung yung pag-victimize ng iba't ibang buyers, Mr. President. At saka who will we be requiring to register their participants in their platforms or their vendors? Ito lang bang mga well-known like Shopee and Lazada? Ngayon daw yung mga ibang apps nagagamit na. Meron na bang vendors sa TikTok? And vendors na businesses. So yan, and then according to the younger ones, Mr. President, itong mga apps na mga TikTok, Instagram, may mga vendors na rin. Vendors as in engage in the business of selling items, Mr. President. So, how will an app know that it is a platform required now to register or send information about their sellers or vendors, Mr. President?
Well, under the law, if you see, it's based on the transactions that they make. If it's a business-to-consumer transaction, business-to-business transaction, they will be required to register with the online business directory. So that's the hard and fast rule. It makes no distinction between the size of the platform, whether it's big or whether it's small, whether it's TikTok, whether it's Lazada or whoever. The distinction is in the type of transactions that are made in the respective platform.
So, and the law, and they are presumed to know the law, and the law applies to them. They do not need to wait for a communication from the DTI that you are supposed to register under the OBR under the law.
Yes.
Basta, yeah,
If you make a transaction, you have to.
Okay, pero unfortunately nga, I'm sure yung fraudster na who will qualify under C2C, although I have only met one victim, I am sure that there is more than one victim, Mr. President, and that is what I think we also need to look for, search for the remedy for the victims, Mr. President.
Yes, we think with this law, it's a substantial step forward in terms of increasing our ability to enforce and address the complaints of a lot of the consumers. I'm not saying that no one will slip through the cracks, but definitely it'll be a substantial improvement. And if should there be any improvements that you can see in possible amendments, we are more than open to consider these.
So even on the idea of covering some C2C online transactions, Mr. President, especially when they were really meant to scam the victims, Mr. President?
Mr. President, of course, we are open to any suggestions. If maybe conceptually, we don't want there are reasons for not addressing the C2C. But if there's some amendment that we can do in the law that will also address those types of concerns, maybe creating a mechanism that services those also, we are open to that.
Thank you for that, Mr. President. We will try to come up with the language to give our victims of these kinds of transactions also some remedy, Mr. President. Now, Mr. President, for example, Shopee has 300,000 vendors. More or less, ilang percentage po doon ang vendors ng Shopee who are outside of the territory of the Republic of the Philippines?
I don't have the data right now, Your Honor, but perhaps we can submit it to you if you would like.
Does the e-commerce division have any idea? Anyway, sila naman yung think tank on policies on the internet. I believe they should have already an idea. Kunyari si Lazada with 500,000, ilang kaya dun yung...
Yes, to be honest, Your Honor, that's precisely the reason why we need this online business registries. Right now, they're not required to register. So even for us, even for the DTI, it's very difficult to come up with accurate numbers.
Because my next question, Mr. President, is if there is now a Filipino victim in the sense that the buyer through these online platforms received either a fake item or an item which was not the one ordered, or some other instance where the consumer has the right to complain. And that person, that Filipino victim, approaches now the e-commerce bureau. The E-commerce Bureau will now, because of our online business registration, we now know we have all the complete details about the vendor. But the vendor is based in a foreign country, Mr. President. So the E-commerce Bureau gives the victim the details of the offending seller. The complaint is referred to the FTEB. The FTEB will now hear the case and will come up with a decision. Okay, vendor, you are supposed to compensate return the money of the victim plus interest. The vendor totally ignores the entire process, Mr. President, because it is based in another country. Now the victim, the Filipino victim, has this judgment in his favor. What will happen, Mr. President?
Well, under Section 6 of the proposed ITA, the law is explicit about extraterritorial application. The ITA states that anyone transacts online in the Philippine market is presumed to be conducting business in the country and shall be subject to all applicable Philippine laws and regulations. This is the reason why foreign entities do not have any real or legal presence in the country that do not have any real or legal presence in the country are required to notify the E-commerce Bureau for their inclusion in the Registry of Online Business, or may designate a resident agent to receive notices on their behalf. Also, if there is a cross-border dispute, the resolution will go on board with the Asian Committee on Consumer Protection.
Where is the recourse, Mr. President? Hinahabol na ng victim yung vendor. Nalaman na natin yung identity ng vendor kasi nga kasama siya sa online business registration. Except that, nakabase nga siya sa ibang bansa. Ngayon, totally in-ignore na lang niya yung kaso, may award na si victim na dito sa Pilipinas. Ano nang next step po natin, Mr. President?
Yes. That's why it's also important to note that if these sites, if they're not able to address some of these concerns, they do have they have a takedown power to help enforce. If the platform here is unwilling to,
Is the takedown power of from the FTEB, the takedown power is with the DTI Secretary?
The DTI Secretary.
Yes, kaya nga. From the FTEB, because the judgment is being ignored, it will now be the FTEB which will call the attention of the Secretary that this is an erring site which access should be prevented, Mr. President. Ganun po ba yan?
yes, and it's also important to note that the platform is also subsidiarily liable for these transactions, meaning should the merchant not be able to address the concerns of the consumer, then the platform will then be liable for that. If it's
Actually, that's where I'm going to, Mr. President. Last point ko na to yung liability ng online platform. So in that particular case, Mr. President, okay, so yung access to the site of the vendor will be blocked, okay yun, to prevent future victims. We're talking about a person na na-victimize na. So, what are the requirements, Mr. President, for the online platforms, so-called subsidiary liability to come in, Mr. President, na mahahabol naman siya ni victim, Mr. President?
What are
the conditions? Or what are
the conditions?
The conditions. I remember that. I remember na, nabasa ko yan.
Here in Section 28, it's stated here, and I quote, notwithstanding an e-marketplace or digital platform that facilitated the subject online purchase by the online consumer of goods and service shall be subsidiarily liable to the online consumer if any of the following circumstances are present. A, the digital platform / e-marketplace has failed to exercise ordinary diligence in complying with its obligations under Section 23 hereof, resulting in loss or damage to the online consumer. B, if the digital platform e-marketplace had failed after notice to act expeditiously in removing or disabling access to goods and services that.
Ang question kasi namin, Mr. President, is why in the first place na-accredit si vendor sa online platform na nagbebenta ng fake goods, counterfeit goods. So, and then, once the victim now sues for reimbursement or to vindicate his rights, pwede pa siyang i-ignore nung site na yon, nung vendor na yon, and then kumakain pa po ng mahabang panahon o mahabang oras. That's why our point, Mr. President, is why don't we make it from the very start that the online platforms, to force them to observe extraordinary diligence or additional diligence in accrediting their vendors, let's make their liability solidary, Mr. President, with the erring vendor. Kasi in the first place, with 500,000 vendors, 300,000 vendors, makikita natin na these online platforms went for quantity rather than quality. Paramihan lang ng vendor, bahala na kung sino ma-victimize dyan. And then in the first place, Mr. President, kung umabot na si victim sa e-commerce bureau na doon na siya nagreklamo, then the remedy was not provided by the online platform kasi dapat hindi na umaabot doon eh. So kung lumabas na siya sa online platform, tumakbo na sa gobyerno, we believe that the liability of that online platform, which through its technology made the fraud, the hoax, or the estafa possible, should be solidarily liable with the person who directly perpetrated the fraud, Mr. President.
Yes.
So that is our position, and
Yes,
and I hope the sponsor is still open to, but this is a big change, Mr. President, from the
Yes,
from
we're
our,
open. And,
from our draft.
in fact, there's some portion, part of the bill specifically states that the digital platform, and I quote, the digital platform or e-marketplace shall be solidarily liable if it fails after notice to act expeditiously to remove or disable access to goods and services appearing on its platform. So
May we know
yeah.
section and
this is on section. This is on section 28.
28.
Page 26, line 26, Your Honor. Line what?
Yes, maganda po ito, pero this prevents the future perpetration of the fraud, the future victims, future buyers from being victimized. But we're talking about an actual case where there is already a victim, Mr. President.
Yes.
Yung remedy
Yes,
niya, ang remedy niya, parang napakahaba, padadaan din siya sa butas ng crime na baka marami na rin mag-give up, hindi na lang nila i-pursue, Mr. President.
Yes, we are open to amendments that will address that concern, Your Honor.
So yes, that's a good development, Mr. President, if our sponsor is open to, from the very start, making the liability of this online platform. So ulitin ko, kasi nagtagpo si buyer at saka si seller, nagtagpo lamang dahil sa technology of the online platform. Yung parang siya yung venue, yung because sa online venue siya po nagbigay. Doon sila nagtagpo and bakit ka may vendor na ganun?
Yes, Your Honor,
na manloloko sa...
we are open to any amendments that would increase the, I guess, the preemptive, preemptive provisions, and not just to make to make any amendments that would make the provisions of the bill more preemptive as opposed to responsive, just purely responsive. So we want to, if something can be done to preempt these instances of fraud, of course, Your Honor, we will be open to any amendments.
Yes, thank you for that, Mr. President. Yes, kasi kung malaman ni online platform na solidarily liable siya, siya na ngayon mismo ang magsiscreen ng mga 500,000 o 300,000 na current vendors niya. Alisin na dyan niya yung may mga masasamang track record sa dami na ng complaints, Mr. President. And of course, we are making the life of the victim easier. Makarecover siya. No matter the amount, madali na siya makarecover. Kasi kung umalis na talaga sa online platform yung kanyang venue, pumunta na siya sa gobyerno, that means it's really na give up na siya. Give up na siya rin sa remedies niya sa online platform. And it's time for the government to come in and let's make the life of the victim easier to seek his remedies under the law, Mr. President. So, with that manifestation or with that agreement, that's our last point, Mr. President. Yung iba naman kasi, I mean, the sponsor already said that the current bill we are discussing is subject to for improvements and amendments, Mr. President. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator
Thank you, Your
Pimentel. This representation will also introduce some amendments, and we thank the sponsor for being open to amendments. Session is suspended for a minute. Ang Mr. President, there being no other member who wishes to interpolate, I move to close the period of interpolations and debate.
There being no objection to the motion, motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 1846. So move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, motion is approved.
Mr. President, some administrative matters and upon conferring with the concerned committee chairpersons and with the consent of the body, I move to transfer the primary committee referral of the following bills pertaining to Overseas Filipino Workers Hospital Act from the Committee on Migrant Workers to the Committee on Health and Demography, and to make instead a secondary referral thereof to the Committee on Health and Demography and Finance. Senate Bill number 2340 and House Bill number 8325. I so move, Mr. President.
Just to clarify, so the primary, we're going to move it to the Overseas Filipino, we're going to move it to which primary committee again?
From the Overseas Filipino Workers
To the Committee on
to
Health.
the Committee on Health.
Okay.
That
There
is my
being-
understanding given to me by the
Yeah, because
Secretary.
it was read. Because it says here, it's, okay. There being no objection, motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, pursuant to Section 18 of the Rules of the Senate and upon the instruction of the Chairperson of Committee on Health and Demography, Senator Christopher Bongo, may I manifest the creation of a subcommittee to hear the following measures with Senator Raffy Tulfo as chairperson. Senate Bill number 2340, 2297, and House Bill number 8325. This is Overseas Filipino Workers Hospital Act. Senate Bill number 2339, OFW Hospital and OFW Care Centers Act, Senate Bill number 1512, Bagong Bayani Ward Act, and Senate Bill number 566, Bagong Bayani Filipino Hospital Act, and such other bills and resolutions which may be referred to the Committee on Health and Demography covering the same topic. I so manifest, Mr. President.
There being no objection, motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this juncture, I move that we adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Tuesday, August 22, 2023.
There being no objection to the motion of the majority floor leader, the session is adjourned till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Tuesday, August 22, 2023. Have a safe weekend, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. President.